of time, but it's also like, how far are they willing to go to keep this show on air? Do you know what I mean? Certain shows like Lost, like Once Upon a Time, like fucking Supernatural, all of those shows, hundreds and hundreds of episodes, 15 seasons each. Not really, but Once Upon a Time has arcs. So there's essentially like 14 different mini seasons in there, which is kind of insane. Today we're going to be talking about only season 1. And you're probably looking at the length of the video and thinking to yourself, how much could you possibly say about one season of television? Oh my goodness, there's so much, just you wait. So the entirety of Once Upon a Time aired from October 23rd, 2011 to May 18th, 2018. Obviously, I didn't get the chance to watch the first few seasons as a kid when they were airing live because I was literally like 6 or 7 when it first came out. I watched the last 3 seasons live, I believe, 5, 6, and 7, which are generally considered to be the worst seasons. As I said before, season 5 just... And don't worry, if you haven't seen the show, I am going to be diving into every single possible element that I could think of about this show. So if you haven't seen the show and you want to go watch it before watching this video, just know you're going to have to deal with 156 episodes. Before we get going, I do just want to plug my Patreon, which is down in the description. This video will be out a day early on there, and then I'm going to do like a monthly video that's like shorter in length than these longer type videos, and that will come out a week early prior to the YouTube release. So I have one on American Horror Stories that should be coming out on YouTube after this one. So Once Upon a Time was created by Adam Horowitz and Edward Kitsis. They were writers on Lost, funnily enough, so there's a lot of similar themes between both shows. The duo wanted to create a show with hope and love at the center. They had experience with that a little bit on Lost, which had elements of hope and destiny in it, but they wanted to create a show where that was the main focus. They had pitched the show in the mid-2000s, but decided to develop it after they were done working on Lost, which is why the show came out a whole year after Lost had ended. The synopsis of season 1 is pretty simple. I'm just going to read you the synopsis from Wikipedia. The series is primarily set in a fictional seaside town of Storybrooke, Maine, in which the residents are actually fairy tale characters that were transported to the real world town and robbed of their memories by Regina, the evil queen, who used a powerful dark curse. The residents of Storybrooke, where Regina is mayor, have lived an unchanging existence for 28 years, unaware of their own agelessness and their past lives. The town's only hope lies with a bail bonds person named Emma Swan, who is the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming. Emma was transported from the enchanted forest to the real world via a magic wardrobe as an infant before the curse was cast. As such, she is the savior, the only person who can break the curse and restore everyone's lost memories. She is aided by her 10-year-old son, Henry Mills, with whom she was recently reunited after giving him up for adoption upon his birth, and his Once Upon a Time book of fairy tales that holds the key to breaking the curse. Henry is also the adopted son of Regina, providing a source of both conflict and common interest between the two women. Now, I'm sure by the sounds of that, it sounds extraordinarily goofy, and it is. This aired on ABC, so it's still the House of Mouse. It's not some dark, twisted retelling of fairy tales, which is an actual common misconception. When I showed my boyfriend this show, he was like, this is not at all what I had expected out of this TV show. I thought it was going to be like the grim versions of these fairy tales and not necessarily just like the Disney ones retold. And when you think about it, this show, along with Alice in Wonderland 2010, really sparked the Disney live action remake fad that happened in the 2010s and is still currently happening and flopping. Once Upon a Time, for all intents and purposes, should not work in my opinion. The show reaches very high highs, but also reaches extremely low lows. It has a general middle of the road production value, but when you take into consideration how many episodes there are every single season, it becomes very clear why the CGI is never quite decent. For a series that showcases witches, trolls, dragons, werewolves, the CGI is very low quality. But like I said, they have 22 episodes every single season that they have to do CGI for, so therefore the budget gets spread very thin and oftentimes has to be allocated for other purposes, such as keeping Lana Parrilla and Robert Carlyle on the payroll. Much like its predecessor Lost, Once Upon a Time follows an episodic flashback format where each episode will focus on two major storylines, one set in the present day to forward the plot and one of its many storylines, and one set in a random point in time prior to the curse that focuses on one or two of its main characters. Sometimes the episodes can focus on side characters, and those generally tend to be the less captivating episodes. This format can be extraordinarily repetitive, but once you've seen it enough times, and if you're familiar with Lost and how they do the exact same thing, it becomes a little bit more bearable. Although many of the flashbacks serve not only as a tool to reveal character origins, but also make sense in the larger picture of the episode. If the writers play their cards right, you leave any given episode with a feeling of satisfaction due to how much the writers love to have flashbacks almost mirror the present day storyline. For example, in the second episode of the series, titled The Thing You Love Most, the flashbacks not only reveal the story of how the evil queen was able to cast her curse, but they also reveal a possible reason.
What Snow did to me, what she took from me, it's eating me alive, Daddy. Her very existence mocks me. She must be punished.
She poisoned an apple because she thought I was prettier than her. You have no idea of what she's capable of.
So, what did you do to incur that much wrath?
She blames me for ruining her life.
Did you?
Yes.
We learn here that Snow White must have done something to the evil queen, and that the fairest of them all trope from the fairy tale that we all knew and loved from our childhood doesn't necessarily carry on over to this version of the fairy tale, and has very little to do with the evil queen's hatred for Snow White in the series. The flashbacks story also mirrors the evil queen's story in the present day, Regina in our world trying her best to keep Emma away from her son, almost as if it's like a one-sided beef, much like the one that Snow and Regina have in the past. The layers to this that I haven't even explained yet, don't you worry, it gets very messy. With that being said, the flashbacks are very hit or miss, and usually they take up like 25 to 50% of the episode, which is a lot of time spent away from the current day storyline. I think the best flashbacks tend to be the ones that set up a clear mystery, define its rules, before in the final few scenes where all is revealed. There are some flashbacks in this show that I think really do not need to exist. For example, I personally did not need to see how dwarves are born. Or how Jiminy Cricket became a cricket. Yes, those are actual flashbacks that we will see in this show. Aside from those one-off episodes, a majority of the flashbacks are really well thought out, and I want to actually applaud the writers here because the fact that they were able to come up with enough stories and flashbacks to fill 7 seasons of 22 episodes each is kind of insane when you think about it. Like, I wouldn't be able to do that. The better episodes tend to be self-contained, but also allow room for the writers to expand on certain elements to a character's story in later on episodes. For example, in season 1, Snow and Charming without a doubt have the most flashbacks. They have a very loose storyline woven through 8 to 10 episodes in this season, and here are the episodes that I can think of that tie into the main Snow White retelling of this show. In season 1 alone, we have the pilot, episode 3, Snow Falls, episode 6, The Shepherd, episode 7, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, episode 10, 7:15 a.m., episode 13, What Happened to Frederick, episode 16, Heart of Darkness, episode 21, An Apple Red as Blood, and finally episode 22, A Land Without Magic. That's not even counting episodes that only feature Snow White and Prince Charming. There are plenty of crossovers in this show. For example, in episode 4, The Price of Gold, the episode is largely centered around Cinderella. However, there are certain flashbacks that reveal Snow White and Ella know each other due to their kingdoms being close by. I believe that this is a smart idea from a marketing standpoint, because even if the viewer knows that it's an episode about a D-level character such as Ella, that's not necessarily my opinion. The show just never uses her again besides like 1 or 2 episodes. Anyway, even if the viewer knows that an episode is about a recurring character, they'll still see some familiar faces such as Snow White, Prince Charming, or even Rumpelstiltskin to hold them over. I could keep talking at length about the flashback format and how I think it really does work for this kind of show. And I think it's missing from a lot of TV shows nowadays. I mean, some of them use it very loosely, but not to the extent of Once Upon a Time, where you know that you're getting at least 25% flashback in any given episode. Okay, so now it's the time where I actually get to show you guys all the characters and tell you about all of them. Where do I even start? Let me start with people that might be familiar to the average viewer. First, we have Snow White. Famously known for her friendship with the 7 dwarves, Miss Girl here is in love with and is married to Prince Charming. This can get very confusing because Prince Charming technically is a part of Cinderella's fairy tale and not Snow White's. And in Snow White, the prince is just called the prince. Already we're in the confusing waters with this TV show. I know, it's confusing. Just stick with me. They have a daughter named Emma Swan. Obviously, if you know what the show's about, Emma was given up by these two so that she could become the savior. She was put in a magical wardrobe at the time of the evil queen's curse so that she could one day return on her 28th birthday and break the evil queen's curse in the land without magic. She is the daughter of Snow White and Prince Charming. Got it? Got it. Snow White's stepmother is Regina, aka the evil queen. As I alluded to earlier, she cast the dark curse, which sent everybody from the fairy tale world to our world in Storybrooke, Maine. So that's why I have a dotted blue line to Snow White from Regina, because that signifies adoption. We also find out that Emma has a kid named Henry. So Henry is the one that finds Emma and brings her to his town of Storybrooke. Henry was given up for adoption by Emma because Emma was 18 when she had Henry. Henry just so happened to be adopted by the evil queen, Regina. If you're keeping track, is Snow White's stepmother. So that makes Regina not only Henry's adopted mother, but also Henry's adopted great-grandmother. If this is confusing to you, just imagine you. You are Henry, okay? Your great-grandmother, who adopted your grandmother, also adopted you, making you and your grandmother siblings. This isn't even as confusing as it's going to get. It's going to get worse, trust me. So Regina, Snow, Charming, Emma, and Henry are like the main staple of this show in season 1. We also have Rumpelstiltskin, and we will learn so much about his family tree as the season progresses. In episode 2, we learn that Regina's father, his name is Henry Sr. We also have characters like Archie, which I mentioned before, who aren't really tied to the family tree, but he is still a main character here in season 1, so therefore I've put him on the board. We also have Graham, who is later revealed to have been in a affair kind of relationship with Regina, which I'll touch on later. It's kind of controversial, but those are all the main slayers in the first episode. In my opinion, the first 3 episodes act as one long pilot. All 3 episodes focus on the start of the Snow White aspect of this show. The pilot tells the story starting at the point of Snow White being awoken by Charming. Yes, in this show, his name is Prince Charming, even though Prince Charming is a part of Cinderella's story and not Snow White's.
You found me.
Did you ever doubt I would?
At their wedding, the evil queen shows up and makes a dramatic entrance and threatens to curse all the lands.
You've made your vows, now I make mine. Soon, everything you love, everything all of you love, will be taken from you forever. And out of your suffering will rise my victory. I shall destroy your happiness, if it is the last thing I do.
In this episode, it's told from the perspective of Snow White and Prince Charming as they deal with the threat that the queen has given them. They even go as far to go and see an evil sorcerer named Rumpelstiltskin who has been detained. The only thing the deranged man wants in return for information is the name of their unborn baby.
Hey, down! We made a deal! I want her name! We had a deal! I need her name!
Tell me, what's her name?
Emma.
We eventually see the curse take over later in the episode, but before it does take over, Snow White and Prince Charming send their newborn Emma through the magical wardrobe carved by Geppetto. At the end of the episode, Regina stands tall over the two, having finally won against them.
Why did you do this?
Because this is my happy ending.
Episode 2's flashback showcases the evil queen's point of view of the lead up to the curse. This series does villain origin stories extremely well. However, I wouldn't call this episode an origin story. The episode, for all intents and purposes, serves as a continuation of the pilot to give us more context as to why the curse was cast. Regina has to travel to the Forbidden Fortress to retrieve her previously traded dark curse. After a not so epic duel with Maleficent, Regina comes out on top. Later in the episode, she visits Rumpelstiltskin in his cell and he tells her what she must do.
What must I do to enact this curse?
You need to sacrifice a heart.
I sacrifice my prize steed.
A horse?
Tell me what will suffice.
The heart of the thing you love most.
What I love most died because of Snow White.
We learn here that Regina must crush the heart of the thing that she loves most in order to enact the curse, which is the heavy sacrifice that must be made.
I think you're right.
I can be happy. Just not here. I'm sorry.
The third episode takes us back a few years before the curse was cast. Snow White and Prince Charming meet while Snow is a bandit on the road, and Charming is a prince who's about to be married for his fiance's money.
Girl.
Woman.
After Snow White's robbery on their carriage goes south, Snow White is found by Prince Charming, whose real name is James, although there is a caveat to that, which I'll explain later. And together, they head to the troll bridge to get Charming's ring back that Snow traded. They fight off trolls to get the ring back, and it's here where their love first blossoms.
And, you can't get married without this.
I know, not your style.
Well, there's only one way to find out. Yeah, not me at all.
They exit each other's stories for a while, but we obviously know in the years to come they'll find each other yet again. I think the flashbacks of those 3 episodes really act as the beginning of this huge story that they're about to tell, so therefore I wanted to break them down just shortly at the beginning of the video rather than waiting for those episodes to come along, because I think that they do such a good job at setting up mysteries such as what exactly happened to Emma? How does Charming know where to find Snow White in episode 1? Why are Snow and Charming separated? Why is Snow White on the run? Why does the evil queen hate Snow White? All of these things are set up within the first 3 episodes, and answers won't be provided for us for a while, but when we eventually do get those answers, it pays off immensely. I'd also like to talk about Rumpelstiltskin, aka Mr. Gold's backstory. While Rumpelstiltskin is featured in a lot of other people's backstories, his own origin story doesn't come until episode 8 in the series. I'm choosing to reveal certain aspects of his character now because it will help y'all understand who this man is at his core. The show makes it very clear that Rumpelstiltskin at his core is a coward. They literally tell us this hundreds of times throughout the show. His flashback sees him as a normal man before the magic took over his life. We learn that he had a son named Balefire. As a poor villager with an injured leg, Rumpelstiltskin fears his son will suffer the same fate he suffered 13 years prior, becoming a soldier in a war with the ogres. So the Duke enforces the draft by controlling an evil sorcerer named the Dark One, using a dagger that has his magic tethered to it. This will become very important later on, so just keep that in mind. Rumpelstiltskin tries to steal this dagger and control the Dark One himself by breaking into the Duke's castle.
If you were to steal the dagger, then you would control the Dark One yourself, and then no one would be able to take your son away from you.
However, Rumpelstiltskin is swerved and manipulated by the Dark One to kill him.
What would you have me do? Die.
Which would set him free of his immortality that comes with the territory of Dark One-ness. Upon killing him, Rumpelstiltskin then begins to see his own name written on the dagger. Rumpelstiltskin then kills the Duke and protects his son from fighting in the wars. So we learn here that Gold's past of cowardice literally saw him take up the mantle of the most powerful dark sorcerer just so that he wouldn't lose his son. This show's definition of being a coward is so odd because I honestly would have done the same thing, and I think most people probably would have done the same thing, although taking that much power is a very big responsibility. However, this episode does such a good job at making you care for Rumpelstiltskin if you previously hadn't really cared about his backstory. It's acted so well. Robert Carlyle is the best actor of the show. I will die on that hill. I'll get to the other backstories when I talk about the episodes, but I did just want to break down the first 3 episodes flashbacks and then episode 8 because those are essentially about the main characters that we have going on throughout the whole show. Snow and Charming, part of Emma's story is revealed. Regina, Gold, those are our main players here in this show, so I wanted to reveal their character traits through their first flashbacks respectively. As for the present day plot, we meet Emma Swan, our main character. It's her 28th birthday.
Another banner year.
As she celebrates alone in her Boston apartment, just moments after arresting a guy during an undercover date. Yeah, that's what she does. She's a bail bondswoman. And I know what you're thinking. No, this is not a cop show. Season 1 has some elements of cop shows, but it's a lot more serialized than those procedurals. Emma is found in her apartment by Henry, her son. Yes, Emma has a son named Henry, whom she gave up 10 years ago. Well, if that's not a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know what is. This show, by the way, just does generational trauma so well. Henry forces his birth mother to drive him back to his hometown.
Where's home?
Storybrooke, Maine.
Storybrooke.
Hours outside of her town of Boston. So she drives him home, and on the way, he springs this fairy tale obsession on her. He believes that every living person in his hometown of Storybrooke, Maine is a character in his special one-of-a-kind book of fairy tales, with one caveat: they don't have any memory of their past lives.
Maybe he's just trying to help you.
He's the one who needs help because it doesn't know.
That he's a fairy tale character.
None of them do. They don't remember who they are.
Actually, 2 caveats. They haven't aged in 28 years. And Emma's like, I'm 28 years old. As they arrive in Storybrooke, we meet Archie. Archie is Henry's therapist, and he's one of the first characters we meet in the present day that are allegedly from the fairy tale world. Archie sends Emma to Mayor Regina Mills's house, and what can I say about this performance? She is just so good. As both the evil queen and present day Regina, Lana Parrilla, she's number 2, babes. She's number 2 right behind Gold, and it's very close. We also meet Graham in this scene, who is consoling Regina after Henry had been missing all day. Graham is the sheriff of Storybrooke, and in his past life, he was actually the huntsman from Snow White. From here, Emma shares a drink with an almost threatening Regina.
Am I strict? I suppose. But I do it for his own good. I want Henry to excel in life. I don't think that makes me evil, do you?
Emma leaves Henry at Regina's before getting in her car and leaving Storybrooke. However, on her way out, she gets into a car crash and runs into the Storybrooke sign after seeing a random wolf in the road. The next morning, Emma wakes up in the town jail and flirts around with Jeremy Dornan before Regina arrives and proclaims Henry has ran off again. Using Emma's expertise in finding people, they check Henry's computer and learned that he used his teacher's credit card. And who is his teacher, you may ask? Why, Snow White, of course. Well, actually, Mary Margaret. As I said earlier, a melancholic teacher of the 4th grade, she's much like Snow in the flashback, just more subdued, no doubt because of the curse. Her and Emma begin a very solid friendship here. Regina has been very hostile towards Emma thus far, so Mary Margaret is like the one person that Emma thinks that she can actually trust in this town as soon as she meets her. Almost like they already know each other.
Sorry to bother you. It's okay. I fear this is partially my fault. See, Henry hasn't had the easiest life.
Now, she's kind of a hard ass.
Oh, it's more than her. He's like any adopted child. He wrestles with that most basic question they all inevitably face. Why would anyone give me away? I am so sorry. I didn't mean in any way to judge you.
It's okay.
Oh yeah, we also get this scene.
What he needs is a dose of reality. This is a waste of time.
Emma finds Henry at his playground castle, which is very much a reference to Snow White and Prince Charming's castle in the past. The two have a great conversation, which I always go back to as a really solid foundation that's laid here in the pilot for Emma's character. While the two have very similar upbringings, Emma was never actually adopted, whereas Henry was. The two almost have a trauma off in this scene.
1 week and you'll see I'm not crazy.
I have to get you back to your mom.
Don't know what it's like with her. My life sucks.
Oh, you want to know what sucking is? Being left abandoned on the side of a freeway. My parents didn't even bother to drop me off at a hospital. I ended up in the foster system, and I had a family until I was 3, but then they had their own kids, and they sent me back. Your mom is trying her best, and I know sometimes you think she doesn't love you, but at least she wants you.
It's a very cathartic scene for both of them to air out their individual traumas. I myself am not a huge fan of Henry. I think sometimes he can be a little bit stale, but in this scene, he's very good for a child actor, and I think part of it is having Jennifer Morrison as a scene partner. So Emma takes Henry back to Regina's, and it's here where they have an absolute mother off. Regina threatens Emma.
Yesterday was my birthday, and when I blew out the candle on this cupcake I bought myself, I actually made a wish. I didn't have to be alone on my birthday.
I hope there's no misunderstanding here.
I'm sorry?
Don't mistake all this as invitation back into his life. Miss Swan, you made a decision 10 years ago. I've changed every diaper, soothed every fever, endured every tantrum. You may have given birth to him, but he is my son. No, you don't get to speak. You don't get to do anything. Do you know what a closed adoption is? You have no legal right to Henry, and you're going to be held to that. I will destroy you if it is the last thing I do.
Later that night, Emma decides to stay in Storybrooke, getting a room at the inn run by Granny, obviously from the Red Riding Hood fairy tale. It's here where we meet Mr. Gold, a pawnbroker that owns most of the town. He's collecting rent from Granny when Emma arrives, and he's seemingly in a bit of a trance when Emma tells him her name.
What a lovely name.
Thanks.
While it won't be revealed until later, at this very moment, Mr. Gold's past life memories as Rumpelstiltskin have returned to him upon hearing Emma's name, which is actually a component Rumpelstiltskin built into the curse. And with that, at the end of the pilot episode, time starts to move again, and the clock tower in Storybrooke begins to tick, signifying a change has arrived. With episode 2, we begin to see a trend that I think the show does really well. I alluded to it earlier, but I'm a big fan of the flashbacks that serve a purpose for the characters and the character dynamics, as well as expanding the character's backstory. This episode does that so well. The episode is basically like a mother off between Regina and Emma. Emma is given Henry's file by Dr. Archie Hopper, only for him to report back to Regina, revealing to us that he gave it up to set Emma up as a thief.
That's what you're looking for?
Later in the episode, Emma responds to Regina by cutting down her apple tree.
Doing? Picking apples.
You're out of your mind.
No, you are if you think a shoddy frame job's enough to scare me off. You're gonna have to do better than that. Your move.
It's here where Emma is thrown out of Granny's because of her past as a felon, which the mayor's office had called to remind Granny about.
I'm afraid we have a no felons rule. It turns out it's a city ordinance.
Let me guess, the mayor's office just called to remind you.
Emma finally tries to be civil with Regina by having a one-on-one where she agrees to leave if she feels Henry will be okay.
I have no intention of taking him from anyone.
Well, then what are you doing here?
I know I'm not a mother. I think that's pretty self-evident. But I did have him, and I can't help it. He got in my head, and I want to make sure he's okay.
While she's there, she calls his obsession with fairy tales, quote, crazy.
The poor kid can't tell the difference between fantasy and reality, and it's only getting worse. It's crazy.
You think I'm crazy?
It's revealed here that Regina knew Henry would be at her office at a certain hour, and that Emma would slip up around Henry.
You knew he would be here.
Did I know that my son comes to my office every Thursday at precisely 5 p.m. so I can take him for dinner before his therapy session? Of course I did. I'm his mother. Your move.
So yeah, this episode feels very much like the two are just trading victories over each other, and it's very, very interesting to watch. It's very soap opera-y, but it's my kind of episode where these two are just going at it, going for each other's throats. Like, I'm sure in real life you would not say this to any real person.
I will destroy you if it is the last thing I do.
At the end of the episode, we see Mr. Gold taunting Regina. Regina quietly accuses him of being, awake from the curse, but Gold plays it off. It's revealed here that Mr. Gold is the one that procured Henry for her. In Regina's twisted mind, he specifically sought out a child whose mother could be a threat to her on purpose, knowing one day that she'd show up. I'm not entirely sure if Regina knows at this point that Emma is the savior, but it makes for a really interesting tension between these two mega villainous characters. I also wanted to mention a really interesting aspect to this scene that I think the show does really well. When Regina is barking at Gold, Gold tells her to leave him alone, and he says, please. That is a direct callback to the flashback in this episode where we learn Regina had to go to Rumpelstiltskin herself about how to cast the curse, and he had her add in a component to the curse where if he ever asked her nicely for something, she'd always have to obey that wish.
Should I ever come to you for any reason, you must heed my every request. You must do whatever I say, so long as I say. Please.
It's a fun little callback that kind of goes unnoticed the first time you watch it. If the first episode establishes Snow and Charming's story and relationship as the curse hits, the third episode is much more of a character study on both Snow White and Prince Charming, how they met, how they fell in love, and finally how they ended up going their separate ways. In episode 3, we are introduced to Princess Abigail, who has a red line to David. I know you can't really see, but underneath this character is right where the red line is. Red lines mean they have some kind of arranged marriage or they have some kind of love that isn't true, which is opposite to the pink line, which essentially just means they are truly in love, such as Snow White and Prince Charming. In the present day storyline, Henry tries to get Emma to ask Mary Margaret for help in waking up the John Doe at the hospital. He believes that by reading Snow White and Prince Charming's story, John Doe will awaken. When Mary Margaret tries this, John Doe actually flinches and then ultimately gets up and walks out of the hospital later that night. This scene actually ends up mirroring the first scene of the show where Prince Charming awakens Snow White. So here we have Emma, Mary Margaret, and Graham searching the woods for John Doe. They figure out that he went to the toll bridge, which is obviously a reference to the troll bridge in the past storyline.
Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh my god!
I need an ambulance. You saved me.
Regina arrives to find out that Emma and the others have found John Doe. She reveals to the gang that his name is David Nolan and he has a mysterious wife named Catherine. Interesting. All is well at the end of the episode. However, Mary Margaret's hope has been completely diminished. The shot of Regina at the end, watching as Mary looks on at someone whom she felt a connection with, is heartbreaking. We also see Emma and Mary Margaret begin to room together since Emma has officially decided to stay in Storybrooke. So at this point, Once Upon a Time has basically hit it out of the park with the first 3 episodes. It's a very good start to the season and one that I have absolutely no trouble rewatching over and over and over again. The episodes introduce us to our main slays without giving us too much information. It furthers the plot for the present day and raises questions about how each character became the way that they are after the curse hit. And now it's time to talk about 2 episodes that I think on a fundamental level do not work as well as the first 3. Episodes 4 and 5 both serve as Cinderella stories, with the 4th episode being a literal episode about the character of Cinderella, and then the 5th episode being about how Jiminy Cricket became a cricket by accidentally killing the parents of a younger Geppetto, which is just a sentence I'm gonna have to give you guys context for later. But first, let's take it away to Cinderella, or as I like to call her, Flopella. For a TV show about a bunch of different fairy tales, the first couple retellings are all centered on Snow White. We see characters like Pinocchio, Geppetto, Red Riding Hood, and Rumpelstiltskin, which don't really belong to the most popular fairy tales. You'd think they would start with the most popular stories, however, until this point, they really hadn't besides Snow White. In episode 4, titled The Price of Gold, we see the story of Cinderella. In my opinion, it falls very flat. If they wanted to keep this fairy tale as close to the original Disney film as possible, I think it kind of fails. I mean, it obviously must have been very difficult because the Disney film is set in a much different time period period, and the princesses at the time were very much still in their damsel in distress era. However, that argument can also be made for Snow White. In fact, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs came out almost 2 decades before Cinderella, and this show still manages to make Snow White a very strong character. In the episode's flashbacks, we see Cinderella just after her stepfamily leave for the ball. She wishes on a star, and her fairy godmother arrives to grant her wishes, just like in the 1950 film. However, a twist has been added to this retelling. Rumpelstiltskin shows up and kills the fairy godmother before making Ella sign a contract that's totally not important and will definitely not get her in trouble later.
Yes, thank you.
Anyway, we flash forward to Ella's wedding with Prince Thomas. This can be kind of confusing at first because obviously Cinderella's prince in the original Cinderella film was called Prince Charming, and in the Snow White film, her prince is just called the Prince. So they kind of just like flipped the roles here for some reason when they could have just stuck to the material and it would have been so much less confusing. At the ball, Ella is warned by Rumpelstiltskin about a specific clause in the contract that she signed stating that if she were to ever get pregnant, the baby would immediately be given to Rumpelstiltskin. Ella and Thomas work together with neighboring royals Snow and Charming to trick Rumpelstiltskin and capture him in the prison that we saw him in during the pilot, so we know that this episode takes place prior to when Snow and Charming went to go visit Rumpelstiltskin in his cell.
Just sign the contract, please. Are you sure you're happy with this new arrangement? Then so it shall be.
Meanwhile, in the present day, Ella's counterpart, Ashley, is very pregnant, like she's about to burst. And even under the curse, she still owes Mr. Gold the child. Ella attempts to run away before Gold gets Emma to find her. Emma eventually realizes that the property she's retrieving for Gold is the baby, and Emma ends up going back on the deal with him. Meanwhile, we meet Sean, who is the prince in the flashback, stands up to his controlling rich father in order to help the poor damsel Ashley take care of the newborn. The episode is another Cinderella story of sorts, as it sees Jiminy Cricket as a human being forced to scam with his parents, who are thieves themselves. After going to Rumpelstiltskin for help, Jiminy accidentally poisons the couple his parents are scamming, as he believed he was just giving them the fake cure his parents made up for this illness. He had intended to use the poison on his parents, but they ended up switching the bottles. Later that night, Jiminy wishes on a star, and down comes the blue fairy.
But it is not possible. I cannot bring back the boy's parents. I hear your wish.
Meanwhile, in the present day, Storybrooke is dealing with a cave-in of sorts, and Henry, the little rascal that he is, drags Dr. Hopper down there to look for evidence that the curse is real. At the end of the episode, Emma and Regina work together to rescue Hopper and Henry, and Hopper ends up successfully standing up to Regina, who had been forcing him to work for her, as previously mentioned in like episode 2.
Because someday, Madam Mayor, you may find yourself in a custody battle. And you know how the court determines who is a fit parent? They consult an expert, particularly one who has treated the child. I suggest that you think about that and you allow me to do my work and let me do it the way my conscience tells me to.
Both of these episodes follow a very similar format and have extremely similar themes. The episodes are very similar, both following an oppressed person who doesn't come from a really great family life, finally standing up to whoever had been controlling them. We see Ella use Emma to help stand up to Mr. Gold in episode 4, and Hopper ends up standing up to Regina in episode 5. I think it's okay that they're a little similar. My only real issue with these episodes is that they both don't don't really serve a wider purpose to the main characters' stories. They're both side character stories. I feel like there's not enough about the main story here. It just kind of feels like we're wasting a little bit of time. Technically, Hopper is a main character as noted before. It's just that his one and only flashback story was just done the episode prior with the Cinderella episode, but I digress. I think episodes like this are just okay, and some of the time they can be really good, but if it's about a character that's not necessarily the most important, it can feel like a waste of time when you have so many other characters that you could have potentially flushed out. Episode 6, titled The Shepherd, features a flashback about Prince Charming prior to meeting Snow White. So this can be kind of confusing, but we learned that he had a twin that was traded off to King George at their birth, and when the actual Prince James dies, David must take his place and defeat the dragon that is threatening King Midas's land. We see here that he is forced by King George to take Princess Abigail's hand in marriage. Princess Abigail's father is King Midas, who promises to make their kingdom rich again. Okay, so as you can see, episode 6 introduces us to a whole new lot of characters over here. It's told to us that his name is James, but that's not technically true. His name is really David, much like his present-day counterpart's name is David. He actually has a twin brother named James. These twins were separated at birth because their mother, whose name is Ruth, gave one of them away to King George, which is why James becomes a prince and later dies, which is why Charming has to assume the position of James because King Midas, who is Abigail's father, demands a knight valiant enough to defeat a dragon. James was supposed to assume that position. However, he ended up dying and Charming had to come in and take his place. It's really not that hard when you watch it, but this just looks... As for the present day storyline, David struggles to remember his life with Catherine. You know, probably because it wasn't real. David's memory is eventually jogged by a windmill in Mr. Gold's shop. Suddenly, all his memories flood back into him, and his feelings for Mary Margaret become a little complicated. He turns Mary Margaret down after originally leading her on.
I remember.
Catherine?
Everything.
So I think it's time I talk about Sheriff Graham. In episode 7, The Heart is the Lonely Hunter, set years before Snow White meets Prince Charming, Snow and Regina mourn the loss of Snow's father, King Leopold. Only Regina isn't actually in mourning. As it's revealed, she killed the king herself. Her magic mirror, whom I've yet to mention somehow, helps her find a huntsman to finish the job so that she will be next in line to rule the kingdom.
The kingdom's still loyal to her. They would turn on me.
Perhaps one of your knights, Your Majesty.
I need someone adept at murder.
In that case, you need a huntsman.
This huntsman that the magic mirror finds fails to complete his mission to take Snow White's heart because he is a little bit of a softie.
Sound this when you need help.
What?
It's a whistle. It will bring you aid. You'll be led to safety. Now go.
Regina then figures out that the heart he procured for her was an animal's heart. The huntsman lets Snow White go, much like in the fairy tale version of this story. She then takes it upon herself to take the huntsman's heart out with her bare hands, and this is something that we'll see many, many times in the show. We learn here that by taking a heart, you can enchant it, and then control the person it belongs to, much like the Dark One in the dagger. Meanwhile, in the present day, Graham kisses Emma because he has lost all feeling in his fake relationship with Regina. He talks to Henry later in the episode and actually believes his theory about the fairy tales. Graham convinces Emma to help search for his heart, which leads them down in Regina's vault. And Regina and Emma get into a heated argument.
I don't know what I ever did to you, Miss Swan, to deserve this. To have you keep coming after everything I hold dear.
I told you it's not her.
Henry came and found me. Graham kissed me. Both were miserable. Maybe, Madam Mayor, you need to take a good hard look in the mirror and ask yourself why that is.
And later, a fist fight. Later that night, Graham kisses Emma again, and this time he regains his memories, thus proving the fairy tales are real. Only moments later, Regina is seen in her vault, crushing Graham's heart, effectively killing him off, because if Regina can't have him, no one can. This episode comes off as very strong. However, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that they literally wrote that Regina had been R-wording Graham for over 30 years. I just feel as though that went a little too far, and it's arguably kind of forgotten because it's so early on in the show. This episode also marks the end of the autumn run of episodes, with episodes 8 to 22 coming out in early spring. From what I can find, the only major reason for Jeremy Dornan's exit from the show, besides the fact that he wanted to focus on other endeavors, is that the writers wanted to add some form of stakes to the show that confirmed at least partially that this whole fairy tale thing was real. It wasn't all in Henry's head. While I understand why they did this, I find the whole Emma and Graham brief relationship angle was very rushed, and this storyline should have been saved for a little bit later in the season, assuming that they knew that they were going to get picked up at this point. As mentioned before, the first 7 episodes were meant to be the end of season 1. ABC ordered an additional 15 episodes on November 4th, 2011. While not uncommon for a new series on network television, it's so odd to look back at this format of storytelling nowadays, and there's hardly any full series orders anymore. It's all like 6 or 8 episode miniseries that end up getting canceled once they flop. Anyway, the show had successfully been picked up for a full series. They were averaging like 9 to 11 million US viewers every week, which looking back is nuts, considering nowadays TV shows on network TV can hardly crack 5 million live viewers. Times have definitely changed. Along with this semi-awkward ending to the episode came hope for the future because the series had been renewed. Many fans expressed excitement online for this news, and the show began to get like a bit of a cult following. It was getting very big on Tumblr around 2011, 2012. Right after season 1 is when like it was just like popping off. So moving on to episode 8, this episode features the first flashback centered on Rumpelstiltskin, about him turning into the Dark One, which I mentioned before. The present-day storyline features an election for town sheriff between Emma and Sydney Glass. The flashback is relevant to the present day because Emma comes to Gold and asks him to assist her in getting elected, seeing as he seems to have a lot of power. Gold starts a fire in the mayor's office, unbeknownst to Emma, which allows her to be the hero and save Regina. This puts Emma at a decided advantage during the election. However, Emma eventually figures out that Gold started the fire himself, and during a debate, she exposes Mr. Gold and believes that she has just forfeited the whole election.
Fire was a setup. Mr. Gold agreed to support me in this race, but I didn't know that that meant he was going to set a fire. The worst part of all of this is I let you all think it was real, and I can't win that way.
This action alone gets everybody to vote for her, as they're more afraid of Mr. Gold than they are of Regina.
Here to card me, officer?
Well, not at all. In fact, I think I'll join you.
Here? I don't know. I think they're setting up a back room for the victory party.
Well, you'll have to tell me what that's like.
Congratulations, Sheriff Swan.
And the fact that Emma has just stood up to Mr. Gold shows people want to support her. It's revealed at the end of the episode that Mr. Gold had even planned to have Emma expose him using reverse psychology. The flashback's theme of coming into power having a cost or a price to pay directly influences the present day storyline, where Emma comes into power herself, but ultimately feels guilty about it because of how she got there. This episode is great in my opinion and is one of the best in season 1, and it's very overlooked. I really love the correlation between Emma and Mr. Gold's stories. So episode 9, titled True North, kind of flops a little bit. It's not really that bad, it's just kind of forgettable, and it kind of goes along the same lines as the Cinderella episode and the Jiminy Cricket episode, although I really do love Regina in the flashbacks. In the past, we see Hansel and Gretel are separated from their father. The evil queen finds them and offers to help them find their father if the children venture into the blind witch's house to retrieve a powerful weapon for her. The children are captured by the witch and make an escape, by burning her alive. After returning, the children refused to stay with Regina.
You were left alone in the woods. You deserve better than a father who would abandon you.
But he's all we have.
Perhaps he doesn't have to be. You and your brother have impressed me. I've decided to invite the two of you to live with me. Here.
No. We want our father back.
We'll see about that.
It's sort of hinted here that Regina just wants a child to love and take care of, which is obviously what we see in the present day with Henry. Regina then sends the children to the Infinite Forest, where they will remain alone, separated from their father until the curse is broken. This episode also features a scene where Regina looks into her mirror and sees Snow White sulking with the 7 dwarves. And don't you worry, we will see what that's about in a couple episodes. As for the present day, Emma reunites the 2 children, Ava and Nicholas, with their father, whom they, under the curse, have never met. The episode is generally considered one of the weakest of the season, along with episodes 13 and 14, which I'll obviously get to. So during this segment, I'm going to talk about Mary Margaret and David's relationship as it pertains to the past and the present day. I've basically tried to save anything like post episode 3 for this portion of the video because their storyline is dragged for this whole season. And episode 10 is like the first episode that we get that's like focused on both of them since episode 6. And I kind of touched on that episode while I was explaining it. In my opinion, this storyline, while it can be very good and well thought out, it can also be a very slow burn. In the present day of episode 3, Snow Falls, we see the origin of their very cursed relationship. Clearly, by the end of the episode, we can see Mary Margaret has begun to get feelings for David as something inside her feels connected to him. David himself has just woken up from a supposed 3-year coma, recently reunited with his forgotten wife Catherine, and then met a new woman named Mary Margaret, whom he also has feelings for, all in the span of a day. In episode 5, That Still Small Voice, Snow helps David rehabilitate as a volunteer for the hospital by going on a walk with him. The two are clearly like already in love with each other. It's here where Catherine shows up and unintentionally splits them up, and Mary Margaret definitely feels guilty for flirting with the man. She can't seem to get him out of her head. In episode 6, The Shepherd, we see David finally return home for his welcome home party, and the only person that David did end up wanting to see after being released from the hospital, Mary Margaret, is nowhere to be found. And Regina is very forceful with Catherine about how she should feel about David not regaining his feelings for her. David walks over to Mary Margaret's house, suspecting he was the reason she resigned from the hospital. Mary Margaret reminds him that he is still a married man, but David ends up confessing his feelings for Mary Margaret, saying that he has absolutely no attraction to Catherine.
Come on. Don't tell me it's one-sided.
You're married, it should be no-sided.
Should be doesn't matter.
Later that night, David essentially confesses that he doesn't have feelings for Catherine right to her face. Later on in the episode, Regina tells Mary Margaret that she and David do not belong together.
You don't belong together. He's not yours. He's taken. Find somebody else.
I haven't done anything.
So he just up and left his wife on a whim.
You did what?
It's here where Regina reveals to Mary Margaret that David has left Catherine. And later in the episode, David confronts Mary Margaret and tells her that if she meets him at the Troll Bridge, he will know how she feels. It's here where we get the scene where David walks into Mr. Gold's shop for directions, as he doesn't remember how to get to the toll bridge, when his memory is jogged by the windmill in Mr. Gold's shop, as I alluded to earlier.
This belonged to me.
Really?
I remember.
His feelings for Mary Margaret and Catherine have now become complicated. He ends up going to Mary Margaret at the toll bridge and leading her on.
I remember.
Catherine?
In episode 7, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, Emma sees that the night before, Mary Margaret had had a rebound with Dr. Whale, the same doctor that she was on a date with in episode 3, Snow Falls. In episode 8, Desperate Souls, David and Mary Margaret are on opposite sides of the sheriff's election, with David in support of Sidney Glass, seeing as Regina and Catherine are friends, and obviously Mary Margaret is in support of Emma. By episode 10, titled 7:15 a.m., the two are flirting with each other, by both showing up at Granny's at the exact same time, only to exchange looks. In this episode, Emma ends up catching Mary Margaret in the act, essentially, and Mary Margaret has to confess that she still has feelings for the man.
This is making a volcano?
So you're a stalker?
No, not really. Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's not like I'm following him.
Later in the episode, at the store, Mary Margaret runs into Catherine, who is shopping for pregnancy tests.
I wasn't looking. Clearly. This must... Good luck.
Regina then gives her a very threatening look, as it's a very awkward situation, and Regina obviously seems to know that the two are flirting around. I also just want to point out, why is Regina shopping with Catherine? Like, I know they're supposed to be friends, but Regina is just seen everywhere with Catherine during this season. It's so funny. This episode's flashback sees Snow White weeks or months after meeting David. Unable to shake the feelings that she has for him, she is told by her friend Red that David is marrying Princess Abigail. Snow White goes to Rumpelstiltskin, obviously years before he's trapped in a cell in her kingdom, and he fashions a potion to help her forget about the prince. Meanwhile, David himself does not want to get married to Princess Abigail. He writes a letter to Snow White via a carrier pigeon, and Snow actually ends up receiving this letter and tries to go proclaim her love for David by breaking into George's castle. However, she is found by George and locked away. While locked up, she meets Grumpy.
Tried it all. Steel gets stronger as we grow weaker.
A mysterious dwarf that we've never heard of before called Stealthy breaks them out, but Stealthy gets killed immediately by King George's men. After George finds Snow White, he tells her that she needs to go and break Charming's heart, or else George will kill Charming and not her as punishment.
Because you are going to walk down that hallway, Snow White. You're going to sneak in and tell him you received his letter. You're going to tell him why you're here. Because you don't love him.
Snow realizes that this is her only choice to stop Charming from getting killed, so she goes to Charming and confesses that she does not feel the same way about him, which breaks his heart.
Now that I know that you love me too.
I don't.
Prince Charming looks for Snow White in the woods. He runs into Red and asks her where Snow White is. Meanwhile, Snow is living with the 7 dwarves, and Grumpy barges into her room with great news. Prince Charming and Princess Abigail's wedding has been called off. However, in the most fucked up, twisted scene, we learn that Snow White ended up taking the forgetting potion and has absolutely no clue who Grumpy is talking about.
Who?
These two just can't catch a break. Back in Storybrooke, Mary Margaret and David help a pigeon, yes, a pigeon, find its way back to its flock. A huge storm hits Storybrooke, and the two find shelter in a cabin in the woods, finally feeling like they are alone enough to do this.
How can you do this?
But Mary Margaret ends up pulling away because she remembers that Catherine is potentially pregnant. However, David was never told about this.
David, I know.
You know what?
About Catherine.
What about Catherine?
That she thinks she's pregnant.
What?
So when Mary Margaret accuses him of cheating on his pregnant wife, David is confused as fuck because he doesn't even know that Catherine is potentially pregnant. So yeah, they agree to stop seeing each other every single morning at Granny's. However, David then reveals to Mary Margaret that Catherine isn't pregnant.
She's not pregnant.
It's here where the two passionately kiss, as somehow this makes it okay. And we see in the background that Regina is just staring at these two with the meanest mug on her face. She is about to be on the warpath in the next few episodes, you best bet. It's so tragic for them to constantly get separated by Regina or George or Catherine. It makes for a very compelling storyline. And also, by the way, David and Mary Margaret's chemistry isn't even contained to the show, as Jennifer Goodwin and Josh Dallas, the actors that portray the roles, are currently married with 2 children, and they met on the set of this show. If that's not the most poetic and beautiful thing in the world, I don't know what is. The 11th episode is a bit of a low point in my opinion in terms of action. Throughout the episode, there's a lot of tension, and it looks as if they're trying to build to something very big. After a small little twist, the episode kind of fizzles out a little bit, and all the tension kind of goes away. Starting with the flashback, we see a genie's lamp being found by King Leopold.
You phony awaken the genie of Agrabah.
And to the surprise of the audience, the genie that actually pops out is none other than the magic mirror, aka Sydney in the present day. I've seen a lot of people complain about this aspect of the show. Throughout the show, we find out that a lot of characters have double identities. Even in the next episode, we're gonna see one. Yeah, just for now, know that a lot of the characters are kind of combined. The king uses one of his wishes to set the genie free and gives his last wish to the genie. The genie then says that he will never use the wish because he knows that the price that comes along with the wish usually outweighs the positives. The genie then agrees to live with the king in his castle as the genie is very lonely. It's here where we see the genie meet Regina.
I noticed. Such a lovely tree.
Yes, it's from my childhood garden.
Over the weeks that follow, Leopold reads Regina's diary, which has an entry about a mysterious lover. The genie is asked by the king to find this man. The genie obviously knows that he himself is the man that Regina is writing about, which puts him at an awkward position. Regina convinces the genie to use the Agrabah viper to poison the king so that they may run away together. He poisons the king and the king dies, which tells us that this episode is directly before episode 7's flashback. Regina basically gets away with the murder and tries to place blame on the genie, who's from Agrabah. The genie, feeling betrayed by Regina, uses his last wish to try and make Regina love him.
You never loved me.
Loved you? I've wanted the king killed and you killed him. You are no longer of any use to me.
There is still one wish remaining. I wish to be with you forever. To look upon your face always. To never leave your side.
However, all this does is trap him in her mirror. In episode 11, we see that this isn't really a reveal, but I decided to keep his identity a mystery so that it could create suspense. But here we learn that Snow White's father's name is King Leopold. He obviously was married to Regina. It's not that hard to figure out. Regina had to have married him in order to adopt Snow. So he has a blue line to Snow because that is her biological dad.
Sí, ya voy, espera, que tengo el pie dormido. El pie dormido. Pie. Bien, ¿salido? ¿La cami? Ah, me dice Adriana del cuartel. Dale. Si la doblo me voy a parar. Dale. ¿Cuánto te vas ahora? Apenas se despierte mi pie, voy a estar aquí abajo.
And he has a red line to Regina because they were in an arranged marriage, which I'll explain later. Meanwhile, in the present day, Henry's favorite playground is destroyed by a bulldozer. We also see David and Mary Margaret having a sneaky little picnic in the woods, which is curious. In this episode, Emma teams up with Sydney, who apparently was ghosted by Regina. They work together to try and expose a possible secret purchase Regina made using city funds. Emma and Sydney follow Regina out into the woods, only to realize someone has been tampering with their brakes. They eventually find out that Gold and Regina had just had a business transaction out in the woods. Gold sold some of his land to Regina. This perplexes Emma and Sydney as they have absolutely no idea what Regina could be using the land for, so they head to her office late at night when she's not around. Emma feels as though she can just barge in without a warrant. This sets the alarm off, which alerts Regina, who shows up minutes later.
What are you doing? Some kids broke in. I heard the alarm, so I'm checking it out, because
I'm sure.
Sydney and Emma play it off as some kids breaking in. The next day, Sydney shows Emma some photographs which literally prove that he was spying for Regina on Emma and Henry. At the city council meeting, Sydney brings up the files that Emma and him found at the office. They accuse Regina of stealing city funds to build a mansion out in the woods.
You claim that you act in the best interest of all of us, but that isn't the truth, is it? The truth is you are a thug that doesn't care about anyone or anything but yourself.
You are right, Miss Swan. I am building a house.
A playhouse.
The accusations are true.
Regina then reveals that it's not a mansion, it is in fact a new playground for Henry to play in. So after the city council meeting, Emma has kind of learned to swallow her pride here a little bit. Not only did she break the law to try and prove the fact that Regina was lying about some mysterious city funds, her exposing Regina just did not end up going over so well because Regina ended up revealing that there was not even anything shady going on. Emma's feeling a little bit down in the dumps, and Gold shows up and offers his assistance in the future. It's here where we see Regina basically forbidding Emma from ever seeing Henry again after accusing her of stealing the city money.
You're gonna stay away from me. And more importantly, from Henry.
And at the end of the episode, we see that Sydney is still working for Regina. So reviews for this episode were understandably very mixed. The flashbacks incorporating the genie/mirror are just okay and does little to convince us why Sydney is still helping Regina in the end. So episode 12. It's one of my favorite episodes of this entire show. I'm going to explain the episode in the order of which the scenes happen and not necessarily by storyline. The episode opens with Sir Maurice and his family under threat of ogres. That's when everyone's favorite clown arrives to help. Rumpelstiltskin says he will keep the ogres at bay on one condition.
My price is her.
The young lady is engaged. To me.
I wasn't asking if she was engaged. I'm not looking for love. I'm looking for a caretaker for my rather large estate.
I will go with him.
I forbid it.
I will go with you forever.
Deal.
Belle. Belle. You cannot do this.
So yes, Princess Belle is officially in this show, and not only is she in the show, but she's Australian. In the present day, Gold is repoing Mo French's car. Mo French is obviously Sir Maurice from the past. At Granny's, Ashley, do you remember Ashley? She arrives and Ruby suggests that all the girls go out for a girls' night. Emma turns them down and gets a call about a break-in. Back in the past storyline, Rumpelstiltskin assigns his new maid, Belle, a bunch of different chores. While making Rumpelstiltskin tea, Belle accidentally drops one of Rumpelstiltskin's teacups.
Got it.
Oh, and you will skin the children I hunt for the pelts. That one was a quip.
Emma, I'm so sorry, but it's chipped.
Oh, it's just a cow.
Back in the present day, we see Gold insists Emma leave because he knows who broke into his house. We see that Gold is very, very upset about a specific object that was taken. Back in the past, we see Belle and Rumpelstiltskin begin to get a little bit more close. Belle is trying to open the drapes.
Thank you.
We see that Sir Gaston arrives, attempting to rescue Belle. However, Rumpelstiltskin turns him into a rose. Belle tells Rumpelstiltskin about her aspirations to see the world.
I'll tell you what. Go to town and fetch me some straw. When you return, I'll share my tale.
You trust me to come back?
Oh, no. I expect I'll never see you again.
And Rumpelstiltskin basically lets her leave to go get straw at a nearby village. So after season 1, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so if you want to remain unspoiled, just skip to this timestamp. There's about 10 different flashbacks with these two characters, and a lot of the time they are not in Rumpelstiltskin's castle. But here in this episode, Belle and Rumpelstiltskin are talking as if her leaving is a taboo subject, something very rare. I just wanted to point that out because it's sort of implied that this episode only takes place over a couple of days, but with the amount of flashbacks the two have together, I have come to the conclusion that they were in each other's company for a few months to even a year. Back in the present day, David is buying 2 separate Valentine's Day cards, which just, that can't end up badly, could it?
The same woman. Well, they're both so us.
Well, you're fortunate you have someone that loves you.
Oh, we also get a scene where Gold kidnaps Mo. Back in the past, Belle is on the road and is stopped by none other than Regina.
Did my carriage splash you?
Oh no, I'm fine.
You know, I'm tired of riding. Let me stretch my legs and walk with you for a spell.
Regina suggests to Belle that True Love's kiss could break the spell that turned Rumple into the Dark One.
He'd be a man again? An ordinary man. True Love's kiss will break any curse.
Which kind of breaks the entire canon of the show, because they had already established that the only way to get out of this is by having someone else kill you and having them take the power for themselves. Also, the Dark One has probably kissed people before, I assume, so why would this time be any different? But anyway, Belle now has a reason to return to Rumpelstiltskin. This scene where Belle returns to the castle and Rumpelstiltskin is so giddy to see her again is honestly very cute. I will admit defeat here. Belle then asks Rumpelstiltskin why his son is gone, and Rumpelstiltskin remains confused as to why she came back.
Tell me about your son.
I lost him. There's nothing more to tell, really.
And since then, you've loved no one, and no one has loved you.
Why did you come back?
I wasn't going to. Something changed my mind.
Oh, qué bonito.
Kiss me again. It's working.
It's here where we see Rumpelstiltskin rejecting this kiss. He begins talking to his mirror, having figured out that Regina is behind all of this.
This is you being the hero and killing the beast.
This true love. Shut the hell up!
Why won't you believe me?
Because no one can ever love me!
This scene is juxtaposed with the present day where Gold vigorously assaults Mo French and screams about how
Ah, that hurts.
No one can ever love me!
This scene is juxtaposed with the present day where Gold vigorously assaults Mo French and screams about how Belle's disappearance was all his fault.
It wasn't my fault!
What are you talking about, my fault? You shut her out. You had her love. You shut her. She's gone. She's gone forever. She's not coming back.
Mo, having absolutely no memory of the past, still believes this is about the van. In my opinion, this is one of the best scenes in the entire show. Like, Robert Carlyle is such a good actor. He is too good for this show, I fear. I could gush about this for hours, but I'm gonna go ahead and move on. At the Valentine's Day Girls' Night Out, Flop Sean proposes to Flop Ashley, and I'm so sorry, I do not really care about this at all. Not after the scene that happened just prior. We then see a much better scene where David approaches Mary Margaret and gives her a Valentine's Day card, which was meant for Catherine.
So, sorry. I meant this one.
Emma, who has just stopped Mr. Gold from killing Mo, tries to get to the bottom of what Mr. Gold is talking about. When Mr. Gold refuses to tell Emma who the woman he's talking about is, Emma arrests him. Back in the past, Rumpelstiltskin lets Belle go and tells her that he doesn't care about her.
Go?
I don't want you anymore, dearie.
You were freeing yourself. You could have had happiness if you just believed that someone could want you. You're a coward, Rumpelstiltskin. And no matter how thick you make your skin, that doesn't change.
I'm not a coward, dearie. My power means more to me than you.
Now you've made your choice, and you're going to regret it. Oh, you have. Is an empty heart and a chipped cup.
It's here that Belle leaves Rumpelstiltskin, and the two will not end up crossing paths again in the fairy tale world. In the present day, Regina allows Emma to see Henry so that she can talk to Gold. She reveals she's the one that hired Mo, all because she wanted to break Mr. Gold so that he could admit his real name.
What's your name? It's Mr. Gold.
Your real name.
Every moment I've spent on this earth, that's been my name.
But what about moments spent elsewhere? If you want me to return what's yours, tell me your name.
Rumpelstiltskin.
This scene is so good, you guys don't even understand. I just want to let this scene keep going without cutting. Please go watch this show, it's just too good. Oh yeah, in the past, Regina tells Rumpelstiltskin she's dealing with a certain mermaid, which will become important at some point in the show. Oh yeah, she also mentions to Rumple that Belle is dead.
Well, you can rest assured I had nothing to do with that tragedy.
After a while, she threw herself off the tower.
She died.
Back in the present day, it's revealed by Regina that Belle is in a mental ward, revealing her to have been locked away by Regina in the past, and that's where the episode ends. So there's this underlying element of Stockholm Syndrome that kind of stains a rather good episode, and I don't want to gloss over this aspect, as that might make this bigger issue in movies and TV shows almost worse. I feel like because they're clearly doing Beauty and the Beast here, they sort of have a pass because they're sticking to the source material. Even though Rumpelstiltskin is being equated to the Beast, it's almost worse than in the 1991 Disney film. The Beast doesn't look human, and therefore his actions of kidnapping Belle are sorta, and I use this word very lightly, justified. Because he doesn't look human, at least at first, before we realized he was cursed, Rumpelstiltskin, however, is human. And while not cursed like the Beast, he once was a good person, and Belle, much like her 1991 counterpart, tries to see that in him. Rumpelstiltskin is different from the Beast because he chose to become a monster, and I think that's the only critique I have of this story, as opposed to the 1991 film. Stockholm Syndrome aside, when you ignore that aspect of the film and subsequent TV show, and focus on the why of it all, I think the explanation here is a little bit poor, and therefore Belle's decision to stay with Rumpelstiltskin is less justifiable than in the film. An update on the tree, we have Rumpelstiltskin has a girlfriend named Belle. While they're technically not together in the present day, they were together in some sense in the past. It's implied here that they have true love, so therefore I've given them a pink line. In episode 13, What Happened to Frederick, the flashback takes place mere days after episode 10's flashback. Before David can find Snow White, as he promised to do so to Red, David is found by Abigail and must venture to a lake to retrieve some of its waters, which have restorative properties, in order to save Abigail's true love, Frederick. So not unlike Charming, Abigail is also very against this arranged marriage. The lake is guarded by a shape-shifting siren. Siren takes the appearance of Snow White and tries to seduce David, however he is able to overpower his lust and kill the siren. David is then able to reunite Abigail with Frederick, and the two part ways. Not very relevant to the storyline in the present day, other than the fact that this episode feels much more Catherine focused than David focused. In the present day, Mary flat out tells David that he has to tell Catherine about them.
And it's time to tell Catherine.
But David fails to tell Catherine, and he continues to lie, and Regina is the one to eventually tell Catherine about the cheating. Ow. So Mary is confronted by Catherine in the school, and she seems to be more upset at Mary Margaret than her own man, which is kind of fucked up if you think about it. And David, he's kind of being a flop around this time because he has multiple opportunities to tell Catherine about it, and he still chooses not to. At the end of the episode, we learn that Catherine has decided to go to law school in Boston.
The way David looks at Mary Margaret, that's what I want for me.
What are you talking about?
I'm sticking to my plan and moving to Boston. Alone. If I stay here, I'll never be happy. I wrote him a letter. Him and Mary Margaret.
I'm sorry, you did what?
I can't see him, not now. It's just too painful. I'm gonna miss you, Regina.
But you know what, Catherine? This just may be what you need.
Regina's plan has basically just backfired on her. I mean, Mary is now being openly catcalled and hated on, but with Catherine leaving, this will allow Mary Margaret and David to get together anyway. If, that is, Mary can forgive David for lying about telling the truth to Catherine, something that Regina cannot let happen. At the end of the episode, Catherine's car is revealed to have been in an accident, and her body is missing. Ooh, that's tea right there. So Regina is basically staging all this to frame someone for the disappearance of Catherine. That's a storyline right there. So episodes 14 and 15 are two of my least favorite episodes in the season. It's not that the episodes on their own are that bad. It's just that the storylines that are featured in the episodes don't really impact the whole wider story. Episode 14 is a Grumpy-centered episode and tells the story of how he fell in love with a fairy named Nova right after being hatched. We see Grumpy before his name was Grumpy. Technically, he was named Dreamy beforehand. He is convinced by none other than Belle in a tavern to go after the woman that he loves.
It's not in his head, it's in his heart. You're in love.
He realizes that fairies aren't meant to stray from their jobs, and neither are dwarves. This episode's message as a whole is awful because it's kind of giving capitalist propaganda. Grumpy eventually learns to forget about having a life outside of work, which, like I said, is a terrible message. And it's not like they're playing it for sympathy. They are more or less saying that this is the right thing to do. But why should I be surprised when ABC's parent company is Disney? The present-day storyline features Mary Margaret and Leroy trying to get volunteers for some Miners' Day candle sale in order to raise funds for the nuns to pay their rent. I think I forgot to mention, but the nuns are essentially the fairies from the past. It's a little bit of a flop episode. There's some funny scenes, I guess you could say, between Mary Margaret and Leroy, but nothing really important happens until the very end of the episode. Emma is investigating the circumstances regarding Catherine's disappearance and takes David into custody when Regina and Sydney, who is still working with her, doctor some fake phone call records to place David as the killer. Also, this episode supposedly takes place on Miners' Day, and if you look it up, Miners' Day takes place on December 6th every single year. But 2 episodes ago, they were just on Valentine's Day, which is in February. Make it make sense. In episode 15, the flashback storyline focuses on Snow White while on the run, and Red right after meeting one another. The two try to find out who the big bad wolf is that's been terrorizing Red's village. Granny eventually reveals to Snow that it is indeed Red in the least subtle twist.
What? Okay. Attack!
Ever. So Red meets her love interest, and Snow decides to stick by her side, and the two flee the village together as now Red is like a fugitive. Meanwhile, Ruby quits her job at Granny's and begins working with Emma at the sheriff's station. Emma basically forces an unconfident Ruby to find David, who's still in the woods, by the way.
Please back up, and we can eat it in the car. I need to do a little wilderness search, and I need your help.
I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna screw it up. I'm not screwed up with Flair, but...
No, you won't. Come on.
After they find him and take him back to the hospital, Emma has Ruby look for evidence at the toll bridge. Ruby ends up finding a box. Yeah, needless to say, Ruby decides to return to the diner at her old job and make amends with Granny. At the end of the episode, Mary Margaret and David remain very anxious about the whole Catherine disappearance situation. This is when Emma walks in and they both prepare for terrible news, rightfully so.
There was a human heart inside it. There's more.
What?
There were fingerprints inside the lid of the box. David, the fingerprints weren't yours. They were Mary Margaret's.
And the pieces have come together. This was Regina's plan all along. She's just pretended to frame David, reverse it, and then pin it on Mary Margaret. Mary Margaret and David have been on such a journey. Oh my goodness. We left off with these two in episode 10, 7:15 a.m. The two had collectively agreed to stop seeing each other despite their feelings. Mary Margaret is very concerned about how Catherine will feel when she eventually finds out about it. David finds out Catherine isn't pregnant, which somehow in their minds makes it okay for them to be together, finally sharing a kiss.
She's not pregnant.
I mean, it definitely uncomplicates it more, but it's still wrong because David is still choosing to be with Catherine. Regina sits idly by, watching as they kiss, while forming a plan to take them down. A plan that will become known in the 13th episode, What Happened to Frederick. A plan that sees Regina kidnapping and or killing Catherine to drive a wedge between the two lovebirds. By episode 14, titled Dreamy, this plan seems unpromising as Mary comforts David in his search for what happened. Regina doctors evidence that proves David lied about speaking to Catherine over the phone the day she disappeared. Emma and Mary Margaret remain in support of David, however, and Emma finds nothing wrong with David's statement, so he is let go. But when a new piece of evidence is revealed in episode 15, titled Red-Handed, the blame shifts to Mary Margaret. By episode 16, titled Heart of Darkness, we will see what comes of Mary Margaret getting accused of such vile behaviors. In the flashback storyline, however, the duo are not doing any better than they are in the present day. The episode takes place right after episode 13, What Happened to Frederick's past storyline. We see since Snow took the potion given to her by Rumpelstiltskin, she's grown to be a bit violent and disgruntled person.
What do you want?
It's dinner time.
She started living with the 7 dwarves and treating them horribly. In response to the dwarves banding together and forcing her to go get a cure from Rumpelstiltskin, she heads to him yet again, instead looking for a magical bow to allow her to kill the evil queen, now having her heart set on revenge. Charming attempts to stop Snow from killing Regina, however, Snow ties him up and keeps him from stopping her. Jiminy unties Charming, which allows him to take the arrow instead of Regina. In the end, Snow chooses to kiss him and her memories are returned. However, just as the two were about to celebrate, King George has found them. Charming is arrested. After this, Snow returns to the cottage and apologizes to the 7 dwarves. Meanwhile, Rumpelstiltskin uses some hair from the both of their heads to bottle some magic for a, quote, rainy day. In the present day, Emma and Regina interrogate Mary Margaret, who Emma believes is most certainly being framed. Later on, Emma looks for signs of a break-in and finds nothing. However, she does find a hunting knife in Mary Margaret's heater. Emma grows conflicted, almost questioning if Mary Margaret has what it takes to do such awful things. Henry proves his mother has something to do with the framing of Mary Margaret when he shows Emma a set of keys he found in his mom's office that allegedly can open any door in town, according to Henry. They test the keys in Mary Margaret and Emma's apartment.
This one.
He heads to Dr. Hopper for a hypnosis. During the session, David's past life memories are returned to him briefly through visions of him telling Snow White not to kill Regina. David is still very groggy after this. The details are very jumbled, and he begins to believe it might have been Mary Margaret to kill Catherine if he has these memories. David confronts Mary Margaret in her cell and asks her if she did it.
You think you remember me wanting to kill Catherine?
Can you explain why I have that memory?
David, are you asking me if I had something to do with Catherine's murder?
Sheriff, found a heart in our spot. It was in your jewelry box. The weapon was found in your apartment. And I have these memories.
When your phone records came back, when I found you wandering in the woods, when everyone thought you killed Catherine, I stood by you. I never once doubted you. You actually think I am capable of that kind of evil? Get out.
Mary Margaret's own love interest is refusing to believe her after she believed him when he himself was accused of the same crime. And at the end of the episode, Mary Margaret finds a mysterious skeleton key in her cell under her bed, and she uses it to escape from jail. I can smell a setup from a mile away. The flashback features a new character named Jefferson, who's confronted by the evil queen who needs his, quote, talents to world travel to another realm in order to retrieve an object a powerful queen has stolen from her. The realm being Wonderland, and the object being her father. Who was shrunken by a mushroom, presumably. The hat's magical portal powers, however, only allow the same number of people per travel. So Regina ends up leaving Jefferson and taking her father with her. Jefferson tries to replicate his magical hat to return to his realm in order to see his daughter yet again. Alright, so episode 17 brings us to the multiverse. Technically, we've already been aware of it, seeing as all the characters went from fairy tale land to a land without magic, but we get our first hint at there being more than two. With the introduction of Jefferson, we learn that Jefferson's hat can take any number of people to any world that they want, and we see that when they step through the hat, it's like a room of doors that takes them to whatever world they want to. The only world that we see other than these two in season 1 is none other than Wonderland. The show gets very, very messy with its world building. Somewhere around season 5, you will probably just lose track of what's going on this board when I add more worlds to it. And don't worry, things will get much messier from here on out. Starting in season 2, the purpose of this board will become a lot more clear. As the seasons go on, we'll see many, many more places in the past and present. Get ready for those. In the present day, Emma searches for Mary Margaret, who has run off. Emma is in the woods when she is found by Jefferson. For whatever reason, Jefferson has remained awake all of these years, and he actually believes in the whole past life theory that Henry has going on. He kidnapped Emma in order to use her supposed savior magic to finish his hat, so he may kidnap Paige and take her away from the curse.
I want you to get it to work.
You want me to get what to work?
After failing to recreate Jefferson's hat, Emma fights her way out of captivity and breaks Mary Margaret out of the house as well. Jefferson, however, is nowhere to be seen. Mary Margaret decides to stop running and return to jail.
But it's your choice. Emma, everyone thinks I killed Catherine.
Mary Margaret, you have to believe me. You have to trust me.
Why is it so important to you? What happens to me?
Because when Regina framed me and you bailed me out, I asked you why, and you said you trusted me. And then when I wanted to leave Storybrooke because I thought it was best for Henry, you told me I needed to stay because that was best for him. Nobody's ever been there for me except for you. And I can't lose that. I cannot lose my family.
Together, they beat Regina back to the jail cell. I just wanted to point out Regina's look of confusion, obviously confirming that she was behind the key appearing in Mary Margaret's cell. In episode 2, The Thing You Love Most, we learn that there is a potential reason as to why Regina hates and wants to even kill Snow White.
But I can't keep living like this. What Snow did to me, what she took from me. It's eating me alive, Daddy.
In episode 3, Snow Falls, after David and Snow White meet, David asks Snow what she could have done to deserve being wanted by Regina. Snow replies with,
She blames me for ruining her life.
The 7th episode, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, gives us some insight to Regina and Snow's relationship prior to Snow being cast out by Regina. Regina seemingly was a comforting stepmother during Snow's mourning of her father. Come to realize, however, over the course of the episode, that Regina had begun to resent Snow and Leopold's relationship, and we will eventually learn that Regina used the naivety of the genie to poison Leopold in episode 11. Regina's plan to use a huntsman back in episode 7 failed because he was a softie at heart and couldn't kill another human. For literal years, Snow lives a life of banditry in the woods, and it isn't until that fateful day where she meets Charming where her luck had suddenly begun to turn. By the 10th episode, 7:15 a.m., however, she let go of David and lied about her feelings for him after being threatened by King George. In episode 16, Heart of Darkness, after taking a memory potion gifted to her by Rumpelstiltskin, Snow White had lost all hope of finding love ever again and set her mind on killing Regina for casting her out and stealing her kingdom. Regina had been living lavishly and often terrorized villages. She even got Hansel and Gretel to steal an important object from a blind witch, which almost got them eaten alive. The important object that they stole? Well, I'll reveal that later. All for revenge on Snow White. But why? What did Snow White do to piss Regina off so much? We get our answer here in episode 18, titled The Stable Boy. Back in the past, we meet a character named Cora. Cora is Regina's mother. We learn that Cora often uses magic to force Regina into a submissive role. Regina has a crush on the stable boy named Daniel and wishes to run off with him. Cora clearly would not approve of this and is insistent on Regina marrying a man of high rank. All of a sudden, a young girl is riding on a horse gone rogue. Regina sees this and hops on her horse to chase after her.
It's okay, dear. You're safe. But I'll never ride again.
Nonsense. The only way to overcome fear is to face it. To get back on that horse as soon as possible. Regina.
I'm Snow. Snow White.
This girl is Snow White. After saving Snow White's life, Regina is thanked by Snow White's father, who just happens to be the king. King Leopold then proposes to Regina right on the spot.
Will you marry me, Regina?
Yes. Yes.
In the days that follow, Snow White catches Regina and Daniel kissing out in the stables. Ooh. Regina makes Snow White promise to keep it a secret, otherwise Cora would have a field day with Regina. Later on, Snow White is manipulated by Cora to reveal what has been going on with Regina, who's been acting odd lately, according to Cora. After learning about all this, Cora confronts Regina as she's about to leave with Daniel. Regina tries to explain the situation to Cora. She doesn't love the king, she loves Daniel, and she wants to spend her life with Daniel. But Cora just cannot let this happen because she's so fixated on Regina being the queen, like the highest ranking woman in the kingdom. Instead of letting them go, Cora takes and then crushes Daniel's heart right in front of Regina. This forces a bitter and resentful Regina to live a loveless marriage and adopt the girl who got her true love killed for 10 years until she finally loses it and has the king killed in episode 11. And that's why Regina hates Snow White so much. She couldn't keep a very important secret. The last scene of the flashback sees Regina in her wedding dress as she hears out Snow's confession.
Mother would let you marry him once she knew how happy it'd make you. Once she knew how much you love him.
Did you tell her about me and Daniel?
Yes.
But I told you very specifically not to.
Regina holds back her emotion and lies to Snow White, telling her that true love isn't real. Daniel ran off.
Daniel has run away. What I had with Daniel wasn't real.
Obviously, Regina knew then and there that eventually she would have her revenge. I stated back in episode 2 that episode was Regina focused, but it wasn't necessarily an origin story. This episode, however, is an origin story. This episode finally gives the audience a reason why this blood feud is happening. Regina told Snow White in confidence about her secret lover, and Snow ended up ratting them out, which got Daniel killed. On its own, this is such a great episode, and in season 2 they'll actually expand a lot more this time period in Regina's life, and those episodes are also very, very good. Alright, so finally the last 2 characters who will be revealed this season have been revealed. There is another question mark here, and I'll save that for season 2 because that is when it is revealed. But we learn here that Regina's biological mother is Cora. Obviously, that means that her husband is Henry, and that's why they have a red line, because it was an arranged marriage. We also learn here that Regina's true love is named Daniel, and that's why they have a pink line. However, Daniel obviously is dead, but I'm not going to keep track of who is alive and dead because that would just be too complicated here. That is the season 1 board. If you would like to take a good look at it. I'm sure you guys will have questions, comments, and concerns about why your favorite character isn't on here. Red, Granny, the dwarves. There's a lot of characters I left off, I know, but they are not technically related, nor are they main characters. So therefore I haven't put them on the board. Sue me. We learn that 1 week before Catherine's disappearance, Regina confronts Gold and asks for his help in dealing with her Mary Margaret problem. And it's here where we learn that Gold was in on it the entire time and helped Regina stage the disappearance of Catherine. So Gold is now playing both sides. Back in the present day, Regina wakes Mary Margaret up. Regina offers her the chance to confess, but Mary Margaret stands by her innocence. Regina tells her that confession or not, she is going to be leaving Storybrooke.
Because confession or not, you're leaving Storybrooke.
And you like that. Why? Why do you take such pleasure in this? What did I ever do to you to make you hate me so much?
Mary Margaret then talks to the DA, Albert Spencer, who happens to be King George's counterpart in the present day. Albert straight up accuses Mary Margaret during the questioning, eventually goading Mary Margaret into admitting that she wanted Catherine gone.
After she made you a pariah in your own town?
Yes, of course I wanted her gone. She was the only thing keeping us apart, so yeah, I wanted her gone. Is that what you want to hear?
Meanwhile, Emma returns to the crime scene where the box was found and finds a piece of a shovel. She illegally searches Regina's garage, suspecting her to be behind all of it, and finds a shovel with a missing piece. Emma now has no doubt in her mind Regina is guilty. After directly confronting Regina with a warrant, who seems to have nothing to hide, Emma sees the shovel has been replaced. So Regina is always seemingly one step ahead of Emma. At the end of the episode, Emma hears Ruby outside of Granny's screaming her head off, and Emma's like, what the fuck is going on? So they go outside and I think it's about time I talk about the August-sized elephant in the room. As you may have noticed by now, I have skipped over any mention, any storyline, any episode focused on August. August is a bit of a weird character in my opinion. He shows up in episode 9 for the first time on his motorcycle. Not even Henry knows who he is. This baffles Henry because according to him, no one can enter Storybrooke unless they are from the land of fairy tales.
I thought you said strangers don't come to Storybrooke.
They don't.
Throughout the next few episodes, Regina and Emma grow confused and paranoid about this August being around their son. In episode 11, titled Fruit of the Poisonous Tree, after Henry's book goes missing, Henry sits at Granny's and tries to write the stories down so he doesn't forget. Later on, we get the reveal that this man is the one who stole Henry's book. Curious. In the 13th episode titled What Happened to Frederick, Emma and August meet, and he later takes her down to an old well for a drink of water. Emma thinks this guy is just some nut, but hours later, Emma starts brushing leaves off her car, and she finds a red metal box that holds Henry's book. At first glance, the audience may be a little bit confused at this whole storyline. I mean, it takes episodes and episodes to be revealed what this guy August is even doing in Storybrooke, why he has Henry's book, why he adds new pages to Henry's book. It's a lot to handle at first. While August is a glorified background character in my opinion, he's one of the only good guys that seems to know what's really going on around here. We don't get many clues about what August's presence means for the show until episode 19 and 20. In episode 19, The Return, Gold spends the episode trying to figure out if August could be his long-lost son son Balefire from episode 8. But Gold eventually works out that the timeline is off and that Balefire would not be this young, seeing as he disappeared almost 200 years ago. In the flashback of this episode, Rumpelstiltskin's son Balefire attempts to take him to another world, a world without magic, a world where they can be together without the weight of Rumpelstiltskin's evil power. Because Rumpelstiltskin is a coward, which the show loves to remind us about, he lets Balefire fall into the portal alone.
We have to go through! What are you doing? Look out! Papa, please! It's the only way we can be together! Cut! You coward! You promise! Don't break our deal! Papa!
Bye.
This betrayal by Rumpel was also touched on in episode 12, Skin Deep, when he's having a conversation with Belle. Back in the present day, after realizing that August was playing him to get close to the dagger, Gold forces August to try and convince Emma of her past in order to break the curse.
She trusts you. It might be enough. Try again.
It's heavily implied here that Gold wants the curse to break so that he can leave Storybrooke to find the real Balefire. And we still don't know who this guy August is and how he knows that the fairy tales are real and why he didn't come over with the curse. It wouldn't be until the season's 20th episode where we find out that August's counterpart is, drumroll please, Pinocchio. Yeah. In the flashbacks, we see the blue fairy approach Geppetto and ask him to craft a magical wardrobe to send the savior to a land without magic. Geppetto basically forces Blue to lie to Snow and Charming about the fact that the wardrobe can only take one. It in fact can take two, and he insists that the other person will be Pinocchio due to the fact that when under the curse, he would be turned back into wood. Pinocchio and Emma land in the world without magic and are found on the side of the road. In the present day, August tries to tell Emma that pursuing a custody battle with Regina would be a huge waste of time. Gold confronts August and tells him that he needs to get Emma to believe because this curse needs to break soon. Later that night, August takes Emma to a diner on the side of the road. August tells Emma that he was the 7-year-old boy who was found on the road with her. August then takes Emma to the tree that they came through in. He even tries to show her his wooden leg, which she cannot see because she doesn't believe. It's here where Emma basically decides that she's done trying to help people in this town.
Needs you. I don't want them to need me.
Well, that's too bad because we all do.
You're saying that I am responsible for everyone's happiness? That is crap. I didn't ask for that. I don't want it.
Right now. A little while ago, you didn't want Henry either, but then he came to you, and now you are fighting like hell for him.
Because that is all I can handle right now, and I'm not even doing a good job at that. Now you're telling me I have to save everyone? That is beyond ridiculous. I don't want any of it. Then you're all screwed.
She has like 5 people at this point telling her this crazy story that she's Snow White and Prince Charming's daughter. I would run too. Later, August has basically given up on Emma at this point, and he decides to ask Marco for a job so that he can spend his last moments as a human with his dad, even if his dad doesn't remember him. At the end of the episode, the most earth-shattering, world-collapsing thing happens. Emma decides that she's been in Storybrooke long enough, and just needs to get Henry the hell out of there. I would argue that this makes so much sense from a character standpoint. Emma is nowhere near ready to settle down anywhere. At this point, she's only been in town for a little over 4 months. We even learn from a number of scenes in episode 2 that she does not like to stay in one place too long. This will obviously have very huge repercussions as she's decided to take Henry illegally. With Emma's character taking such a huge step backward in episode 20, The Stranger, viewers sat in suspense during the last 2 episodes, which essentially are about a last-ditch effort from Henry in getting Emma to believe. From the pilot, it was clear that this show was something special. I'm not sure if everyone knew how many seasons it would eventually have, but reading old reviews and headlines about the show really changed my perspective of how the show was perceived. Like, yeah, the CGI could be better, but the fact that the show had the task of following Lost, a show in which the creators of Once Upon a Time worked on since its inception. Against all odds, Once Upon a Time's pilot was watched by nearly 13 million people live, which definitely wasn't as big as Lost. Apparently, Eddie and Adam had the idea for Once Upon a Time in 2003 before they started Lost, but put it on the back burner until the show ended. Clearly, waiting was a good option because it gave them job security to be able to work on both shows. The pilot's first flashback sees Snow White being found by Charming in her glass coffin as she's under a curse. Episode 21, An Apple Red as Blood, expands upon that part of the Snow White story. Days after Charming is found by George in episode 16, Heart of Darkness, George attempts to execute David when Regina shows up and offers a trade. After attempting to break into George's castle, Snow realizes that David isn't there and that Regina took him. Regina offers Snow a parlay, which if you aren't familiar with the term, basically means like 2 parties on opposite ends of like a war or a battle meeting together with no weapons and no funny business to talk terms. The two have a very powerful interaction at the site of where it all began, a site which now holds the grave of Regina's former lover Daniel, the site of where they first met. Regina says the only way David will go free is if Snow White eats a poisoned apple and falls into a sleeping curse.
It wouldn't work anyway. The choice is yours. It must be taken willingly.
And why would I do that?
You're charming. Will be killed.
Snow White then takes the apple willingly, realizing that she has no other option. Back in the present day, Emma returns to Storybrooke after regretting kidnapping Henry. Emma talks to Mary Margaret, who is more than upset.
Hi, Margaret. But I couldn't tell for sure because you didn't bother to say goodbye. Do you remember when I left? When I ran, what you said to me? You said, we have to stick together. We're like family.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have left.
You're right, you shouldn't have. So why, after everything, did you just go?
I don't want to be sheriff. I don't want people relying on me. I don't want this, any of it.
What about Henry?
I took him with me.
You abducted him. So you don't want people to rely on you, but you took your son. Now that sounds like a stable home for him. What the hell is wrong with you?
She decides that maybe she's the problem and that leaving Storybrooke might be the best option. Meanwhile, Regina asks Jefferson for some help. Together, they use a little magic that Regina has left in this world to reach into the past using the hat that Regina had been keeping from him for all these years. They use it to grab an object to, quote, deal with Emma. I'm not really sure how this aspect works because it's technically time travel. As far as I know, the hat cannot do that. Emma stops by Regina's house and tells her that she's leaving. Regina makes Emma take one of her famous apple turnovers. Emma then takes it for the road. This all comes down to the climax of the episode where Henry decides the only way to make Emma believe is to get her to wake him up from a sleeping curse because he knows that Regina poisoned that apple turnover.
Trick to get you to eat that.
What are you doing?
I'm sorry it had to come to this. You may not believe in the curse or in me, but I believe in you.
See? You want to have some ice cream with that? And then we can go back to talking about...
So Henry ends up eating the apple turnover and falling into a sleeping curse himself. And that's where this episode ends. Henry's decision is not without reason. Emma has basically refused to even consider hearing him and August out. Henry even goes to August in a scene during the episode. August has basically given up on Emma, as I said earlier. Emma seeing Henry faint and then the scene cutting to black signified the beginning of the end. Most viewers had probably assumed that after season 1 that things were going to be shaken up quite a bit. Season 2 hadn't actually been fully announced until May 10th, 2012, just 3 days prior to season 1's finale airing. The writers must have been pretty confident though, as they hadn't exactly provided an end to too many storylines here. I mean, you'll see that the finale is very, very good, but there isn't really a hint of finality to it. So they must have known to some extent that they'd be getting picked up. So the finale's Today's flashback opens with a continuation of the previous episode's flashback. Charming is rescued from Regina's castle by a mysterious black knight. This knight just so happens to be the huntsman. Quick cameo aside, Charming is transported to the Forbidden Fortress by Regina, where he's surrounded by thousands and thousands of acres of trees. Rumpelstiltskin appears out of nowhere, and the two have a duel when Charming refuses his help. However, Rumple bests him and gives him back his mother's wedding ring. The ring is now enchanted to help Charming find Snow White. However, he tasks him with hiding a vial of magic in the belly of Maleficent first. After successfully completing the mission, Charming finally finds Snow White in the scene from the pilot. After the two finally reunite, we get the aftermath of this, where Charming proposes to Snow White and they plan to take the kingdoms back from Regina and George. Meanwhile, in the present day, Emma arrives at the hospital with Henry. The doctors can't seem to find what's wrong with Henry. Emma even digs through Henry's stuff to see if he's eaten anything else besides the turnover. She grabs the Once Upon a Time book, and in the most cathartic moment of the series, everything suddenly hits Emma. It's all true. Regina arrives in distress. Henry obviously wasn't the target of the turnover. Emma and Regina get in this huge fight. Regina confirms the entire thing.
It's true, isn't it? All of it.
Yes. Together they head to Mr. Gold. Gold tells them that he's had a bit of magic hidden pre-curse in the belly of Maleficent, which is a reference to the flashback of the episode where Charming does exactly that. Regina tells Emma what she's going to have to do. She's going to have to go under the Storybrooke clock tower and kill Maleficent in order to take the magic that's hidden within her. Meanwhile, Jefferson breaks into the mental ward to release Belle from her cell. Belle obviously was put there by Regina to keep Gold from his true love. And in releasing Belle, this causes chaos as he's now betrayed Regina just like Regina betrayed him. Emma faces Maleficent and uses her gun and then her father's sword to vanquish the beast and grabs the magic from within her. Soon after, she returns to the elevator and is tricked by Mr. Gold, who really wanted the magic for himself. Emma climbs up the elevator shaft by herself and finds that Regina has been tied up, so the two were swindled by Gold yet again. They return to the hospital together and find out that Henry is unresponsive. This scene is so good. Emma and Regina's different reactions here are spot on. I think it makes sense for the curse to end here, though I'm sure back then it was a little bit of a shock. Like, there's this sense of where do we go from here after this? Mr. Gold is found by Belle, and the two have a very short but sweet reunion. He takes her to a well and dumps the vial of magic down it, which effectively brings magic to Storybrooke. Belle, whose memories are now back, questions Gold's motives as he's now here in a land without magic, so he can go find his son, but Gold says he needs power as well to do so. We see a giant purple cloud of smoke erupt from the well and surround Storybrooke. Snow and Charming reunite and hold each other in the middle of the street as the camera fades to black. Ending season 1 with the curse breaking was a very bold choice on the writer's part. On one hand, it signals to the audience that the story is going in a bit of a different direction, which had fans across the world very excited because for the last 22 episodes, the formula had essentially stayed the same. With the same rules and stipulations, breaking the curse means that the possibilities are endless. Are they going to go back to the Enchanted Forest? Are they going to stay in Storybrooke? Will their cursed lives have any effect on their newly reunited families? I love the ending of season 1 due to how it sets up so much suspense for season 2, and I think that's how a finale should function. You could argue that the writers wrote the curse breaking into the script script because they weren't sure if they were going to get picked up, but I doubt that. On the other hand, it's a very ballsy move because the show now has the potential to get very, very crazy with its plot. I think a lot of people loved season 1 because it was very safe. You had 2 separate storylines in the past and in the present, and they didn't cross over very much. Storybrooke has no magic and therefore separates itself from the fairy tale land. The present day storylines are very focused on real life grounded scenarios. So what happens when you take all of that away in season 2 and all of these people suddenly remember that they are fairy tale characters from stories their cursed selves remember from their childhoods? The show had all the potential to fail after season 1, but I truly believe it tops itself in season 2. The show takes so many turns and introduces us to new and fresh ideas in that season. Many overlook it because it doesn't feel quite as big as the seasons that followed, but I'll do my best to convince y'all when I get to that video. The audience had at least a little bit of a clue of the direction the show was going, and it comes in the form of the last scene where Gold brings magic to Storybrooke. We know we'll be dealing with our old/new foes, Regina and Mr. Gold, but something tells me there's a little bit more in store for our heroes.
This season, you know, I think is the next chapter. Last season we broke the curse and everyone remembers who they are, but they have not found themselves back in the Enchanted Forest, so I wonder why.
If the curse is broken, why didn't they go back?
Is there even an Enchanted Forest to go back to?
So what do we do now?
And, you know, what happens now where they realize what they are and what they've lost?
Me has convencido para bailar, pero estando triste no es igual. He visto mi mente abandonarme y volar, busca el paraíso, no lo encontrar. Que tengas mucha suerte. En tu camino me hubiera gustado haber estado contigo. Es suficiente para hacerle volver, y en este desierto es difícil florecer. A través de sus ojos todo se ve del revés. Ahí está el paraíso para quien lo quiera ver. Que tengas mucha suerte. En tu camino
So I've been almost completely consumed by Once Upon a Time for months now. When I found this show, I was 11 years old, okay? Season 4 had just finished airing, and season 5 was like 4 or 5 months away, and I binge watched the entire thing, all 4 seasons that were on Netflix at the time, and I was absolutely obsessed from the first moment that I watched. It might sound corny, but this was the first TV show that I watched where I actually felt like I was watching something made for adults. Obviously, looking back, Once Upon a Time is very juvenile, and that's probably the reason why I was allowed to watch it at that age. The characters, the costumes, the sets, the story, and overall theme of always finding your true family no matter how far away they are is something I really gravitated toward at that age. I was 10 when my parents got divorced, and I don't really remember much before 2014 if I'm being completely honest with you. Like, my life changed so fast at such a crucial age. I was just hitting the early stages of puberty, and my family had been completely torn apart. I had to move away from my friends to a different state right before the start of 5th grade. My siblings kind of became my best friends because I didn't know anybody in this new town that I was living in. My big sister is the one that ended up showing me Once Upon a Time in the summer of 2015, and I just immediately fell in love with it. I remember seeing Regina strutting around, barking orders at people, and then seeing Rumpelstiltskin in his iconic costume. I'm so happy that I got to grow up with this show and got to get into it at such a young age. Outside of issues like divorce and my mental health struggles, fell in love with it. I remember seeing Regina strutting around, barking orders at people, and then seeing Rumpelstiltskin in his iconic costume. I'm so happy that I got to grow up with this show and got to get into it at such a young age. Outside of issues like divorce and my mental health struggles, I also had to deal with a pretty big dose of bullying in middle school, simply because of the fact that I was the only gay guy in school, and that's just frowned upon in a rural town. Whenever I would come home on a Friday right after school and feel like completely sobbing my eyes out, I'd always think, wait, Once Upon a Time is out in 2 nights. Sundays at 8 p.m. were my escape. For 1 hour every single week, I could be a prince, or a wizard, or a superhero, or an angel, or a demon, or a dragon. I know it sounds kind of absurd and a little cringe to look back on now, but this show really saved me. I don't know who I would be today if it wasn't for Once Upon a Time. I always knew that if Once Upon a Time was on that night, that was my night where I got to drift away and be a completely different person for just 1 hour. And the best part about this is I wasn't alone. I know that if I felt this way, there had to be more kids like me who were just as obsessed with this as I was. I've met so many people online and made so many friends based around this show. So without further ado, let's dive into the season of Once Upon a Time that took it from enjoyable network procedural about fairy tales to, in my opinion, a must-see action and drama show filled with 3-dimensional characters. This is Once Upon a Time Season 2A. Adam and Eddie made not only a really smart business decision in splitting up this season, but also a really smart creative decision in splitting up the cast as well to allow for a season that feels bigger and takes viewers to different storylines that we wouldn't have gotten otherwise. I teased it at the end of the last video, but in this mini season, this like 9-season arc, Emma and Mary Margaret actually get separated from the rest of their people for a considerable amount of time. This is such a smart choice in my opinion because it shakes things up completely from season 1 and allows for more characters to be introduced in the ever-expanding cast of this show. Another reason for this choice is to give Emma a fairy tale experience. At this point, Emma has literally just started her journey as the savior. Rumpelstiltskin foresaw her breaking the curse and fighting the final battle, but she and everyone else are still unsure what that means. By throwing her to the wolves, essentially, this gives her the opportunity to change the way she thinks and feels about her parents' past, and it gives her much more of a perspective on it than she had had previously. Being joined by her own mother on this adventure is even more important for her because she is able to fully appreciate and grasp her past. Although Emma's story isn't really focused on as much as it was in season 1 here, there are plenty of key moments here in this mini season that lay the groundwork for her journey in future seasons. From Snow's perspective, she is returning to the land in which she lived for nearly 3 decades, having just regained her memories of said existence. Both women suffer a bit of a culture shock when they arrive, and it's a struggle for them to navigate their very unique relationship to each other. Just 2 days ago, they were best friends and roommates, but now it's much more complicated than that. They are still the same age, and much of their relationship was actually built on having similar struggles due to said closeness in age. They talked frequently about their romantic relationships and struggles to maintain some kind of stability in their love lives.
But we didn't know that we were talking. We talked about things we probably shouldn't have even talked about. one-night stands and the like.
One-night stands?
Whale.
Whale?
We were cursed.
Mary constantly pointed out the fact that Emma had an affinity for putting up walls and forcing her loved ones away, whereas Emma merely suggested to Mary on occasion that her going after a married man was less than moral and probably wouldn't last very long. Emma in particular faces a wide range of negative feelings about her mother, but must keep them in check to deal with the fallout of the curse ending. She almost, for a split second, takes it all in, but before she can allow herself to break down her walls, they remain strongly secure to protect her from her parents' joy.
Shouldn't we talk about it first? What? Us? Your life? Everything? We do everything maybe later, like with a glass of wine, or several bottles.
Emma must accept the fact that her friends Mary Margaret and David are not only from a fairy tale, but they're also her parents.
I've thought about this moment my entire life. I've imagined who you might be. But of all the scenarios that I concocted, my parents being... I just need a little time, that's all.
She must also grapple with the fact that they chose to give her up, not because they wanted to, but because they were forced to, making her feelings towards them way more complicated. I mean, I'm sure it would have been easier for her to forget about them had they been just a couple of asshole parents that didn't want to take care of their child. But because they did want Emma, this brings more nuance to the situation, revealing it to be more than a black and white issue. She also can't just hide her heart from them, seeing as they are both her friends now. I can't even begin to tell y'all how invested I am in this storyline. They eventually explore this a lot more in season 4 with the whole Emma, Charming, and Snow dynamic. Another thing I think this season does really well is having the characters constantly be at war with themselves between their two personalities. For example, in episode 2, We Are Both, Regina fights her inner darkness and forces herself to be better than her mother when parenting Henry, because she's not just the evil queen anymore, she also has Mayor Regina inside her, and raising Henry made her become a semi-better person. This aspect to the season allows for so much more inner turmoil within each character. David has a similar storyline this season about trying to find the perfect balance between being Prince Charming and being David, aka the weaker man who cheated on his fiancée and lied to his mistress about telling the truth. Even Rumpelstiltskin has an inner struggle this season, albeit it lasts many seasons, but particularly here in season 2, with his newly rekindled relationship with his former lover Belle, he struggles to be the man that Belle deserves, while also wanting to remain a man of great power. His quest to try and reunite with his son also sets him on a journey of self-improvement. He wants to prove to himself and the people around him that he can change as well. Ultimately, there are some wild twists and turns to come out of that storyline, which I'll get into later. Most of these characters are grappling with something this season, and that's why I think it's just so good. They had the opportunity to continue on exactly as they did in season 1, but remarkably so, they decided to choose a new path for all these characters. In terms of new main characters, this season offers us Belle and Ruby. Belle actually stays on as a main character for quite a few seasons, and we'll begin to see a lot of her journey with Rumpelstiltskin as the series goes on. I think the fact that they gave Rumpelstiltskin a love interest as a main character is such a good idea, and I think it adds a lot of different layers to his character as we will begin to see. Season 2A really halts their development as a couple, and their relationship seems to stand a little still this season. In Season 2B, we get a little bit more development with them here and there in one-off episodes. Another aspect of this season that changes from Season 1 is in Season 1, there was always a flashback to go along with the present day. This season also occasionally incorporates a third plot. Sometimes there will be 2 present-day storylines, so one in Storybrooke and one in the fairy tale land, and a flashback set in the past as well. This is the case for a majority of the episodes this season, but there are a few outliers in there. Another huge twist that the show implements early on in its tenure is that Fairy Tale Land wasn't exactly destroyed during the curse. This episode shows us new characters that we've never seen. Prince Philip works with Mulan to try and find and awaken Princess Aurora. We see that Philip hides a mark on his hand from Aurora, and the whole situation is kind of sketchy. It turns out that Philip was marked by a wraith, and later on in the episode, he is taken by it, leaving the 2 women alone.
I love you.
At first, this appears to be a normal flashback, similar to the ones that they would do in season 1, but by the end of the episode, Snow and Emma appear through a portal, which leads them to find out that the Enchanted Forest was never destroyed by the curse. Everyone left behind is still alive, and we also learn that they, like the Storybrooke residents, have not aged for the last 28 years as well. The curse had the same effects across the realms. Throughout the season, we get to know Aurora and Mulan pretty well, and I gotta say, they are welcomed additions to the cast. I find Mulan's inclusion to be particularly interesting and an important part of the show. I feel like she definitely could have been involved a lot more post season 2. In fact, I don't think we actually received a very good conclusion to her character. Aurora is also utilized pretty sparingly as the seasons go on, but I quite enjoyed her in this season. In episode 3 this season, titled Lady of the Lake, we are reintroduced to Cora, Regina's mother, who is still alive and being kept young by the curse. Cora becomes very important as the season goes on. In terms of the marketing campaign this season, ABC decided to be very gentle with it. Instead of dropping a full-length trailer like they did in season 1, they instead opted for a 60-second teaser that showcased a new character the audience hadn't met before. We witness a hooded figure holding a hunting knife that he uses to break into Mr. Gold's shop. He looks around and notices a globe sat next to a miniature pirate ship before hearing the ticking sound of an alarm clock. He picks the clock up and uses it to break the glass of a display case, revealing a metal hook inside. The man then replaces his prosthetic hand with the hook, revealing to the audience his identity. It's here where the character of Captain Hook from Peter Pan was officially announced to be joining this already very vast group of characters. With this teaser, viewers at Comic-Con caught a glimpse of what was to come in season 2. There was also a clip show trailer that aired the same week, but it only offered a little bit of insight as to what season 2 was going to offer. But with the promise of there being a new addition to the cast in Captain Hook, came hope for fans who were probably not sold on the season that hadn't aired a trailer yet. This strategic marketing clearly worked for the show, as the show had a ratings spike with the season 2 premiere. Oftentimes while watching trailers, many fans, myself included, seem to lose a lot of interest in the show due to how much they end up revealing. But Once Upon a Time's decision in not showing really any new footage prior to the season actually airing ended up paying off for them, because there was a huge ratings spike. The premiere of season 2 saw a ratings spike of 11.36 million viewers, a rating that stands toe-to-toe with the first 4 episodes of the show, which all sit around 12 million viewers each. The ratings become a bit hit or miss around the middle of season 2. Season 1 had a very consistent 10 to 12 million live viewers every single week, but season 2's overall average falls between 8 and 9 million. This season shows us the aftermath of the curse being broken. Everyone is still in complete disarray, with a million questions like, why didn't they go back to the Enchanted Forest?
So what do we do now?
Then why are we still here?
What are they going to do about Regina?
Who did this?
Is Emma in charge now?
She did it. She saved you.
She saved all of us.
What was the purple smoke?
What was that smoke?
Most of these questions will get answered as the season goes on, and after a whirlwind of a reunion between the Charmings, Red, and the Dwarves, everyone must come to terms with the fact that they are in a world without magic, and that means everybody is in a bit of a frenzy. They all come barging on Regina's door looking for answers. Emma and the Charmings protect Regina from harm until they can figure out what was going on with that purple smoke they saw. Emma instead decides to arrest Regina when she threatens them with her magic, which ends up failing. Meanwhile, we catch up with Mr. Gold and Belle.
You have to tell me what happened to you.
I was abducted.
Regina.
She locked me away until her curse, and I've been in the asylum ever since.
For 28 years.
Gold promises to Belle not to kill Regina, although he does summon something that can. He visits her in her jail cell and uses some kind of necklace to mark her hand. I think you know where this is going. So the same wraith from before hunts Regina down this episode. The town is in complete chaos. The Charmings team with Regina by using Jefferson's hat to send the beast away. According to Regina, there's nothing on the other side because the lands were destroyed by the curse. And their plan doesn't go without a hiccup, however, because when they open the portal, the wraith pulls Emma through with it. When Snow witnesses her daughter fall, she realizes that she must go after her. At the end of the episode, we are back in the Enchanted Forest, and we see that Aurora and Mulan look through the rubble that the wraith brought with it and see Emma and Snow White passed out. The gag that was this twist. I don't think you guys understand. I was not expecting this. This means that the perceived flashback, including Mulan, Philip, and Aurora, isn't actually a flashback, as it takes place in 2012 as well. And the realms were not destroyed like Regina said they were. Later on, we see Henry tell Regina to help find Snow and Emma, or he will never speak to her again. It's here where David assumes guardianship of Henry, seeing as Emma's not around and Regina is not to be trusted, and that is basically where the season 2 premiere fades to black. In my opinion, this episode was such a refresher for the show. Season 1 was so good, don't get me wrong, but you can only do the same thing so many different times. Magic being in town means that anything can happen within the present day storyline, and opens up the amount of stories that they're able to tell. The Wraith was an interesting inclusion here. It creates more tension between David and Regina, because something that was sent there to kill Regina ended up taking Emma and Snow. Henry now has more of a reason to drift away from Regina as well. As much as Regina tries to help out with this situation, the Wraith also kind of gave Regina everything she ever wanted, that being Emma and Snow White out of her life. Henry is now hers. Well, sort of. David is still in the way, but we'll see where her journey takes her as she struggles to take Henry from David. From all points of view, this whole Wraith thing is kind of genius. I haven't even mentioned Mr. Gold's thoughts and feelings on the fact that Regina was not taken by the Wraith. Hint, hint, he's not very happy. One of the main things I love about this show is that when something big and dramatic like this happens, it affects all the characters differently and allows them to make completely irrational decisions based on their reaction to that information. I'm going to save explaining the flashback of this episode for a bit later, and you'll see why here in a minute. The second episode is one of my favorites of this season as well. It sort of toys with this newfound struggle that resides within everyone in Storybrooke. I mentioned earlier that David will struggle to take control of the town while still dealing with the aftermath of losing his wife and daughter, whom he hadn't even known about until just hours prior, all the while trying to take care of Henry. Surprisingly though, this episode is not centered on David, it's centered on Regina. The episode details Regina's inner turmoil. It kind of seems like she always gets in her own way when it comes to raising Henry.
Henry, I rescued you because I love you.
So I'm a prisoner because you love me. That's not fair. You ruined lives. You sent away Mary, Margaret, and Emma.
That was an accident.
The way you treated me wasn't an accident. You made me feel like I was crazy.
Henry, you can know all the secrets. You can live in a house with magic. Look what I could do. And I can teach you. You can have all the friends you want come over.
They're scared of you.
You can make them not be scared. You can make them love you.
I don't want to be you.
Meanwhile, the town is still in chaos. Everyone is waiting at the town hall for David to give a heroic speech about what their next move is. However, David is late to this meeting due to a run-in with Jefferson. Regina uses this opportunity to scare everybody at the town hall meeting and kidnap her son back from David.
Try calling him again.
He's not picking up.
Just keep trying.
My, what a nice turnout. How sweet.
What do you want?
Me. She wants me.
That's my boy.
David finally gets his shit together and heads for the town line. I think I forgot to mention, but after the curse broke, there's this new side effect to leaving the town. As soon as you step over the town line, you forget who you are, and your cursed memories become your only memories yet again. David prevents the rest of the townfolk from leaving because the people of Storybrooke were scared by Regina earlier at that town hall meeting. It's here where David gives a heroic speech to the people of Storybrooke, assuring them that they can be both their cursed identity and their true fairy tale self because they are both of them.
We are both. Stay here and every choice is open. Live in the woods if you want. Let's open Granny's, in the school, and get back to work. She won't be able to hurt any of us, not as long as I'm alive.
Meanwhile, Regina tries to give Henry anything he desires using her newly regained magic. This sort of frightens him and he wishes to leave. When he attempts to go, Regina uses her magic to prevent him from doing so. David shows up to Regina's house and forcefully tries to take Henry away from her, but Regina willingly lets him go because she realizes that this is wrong.
Henry, you're gonna go home with David. I shouldn't have brought you here. I don't know how to love very well. I wasn't capable of it for a very long time. I remember that if you hold on to someone too hard, that doesn't make them love you. But I want you to be here because you want to be here, not because I forced you, and not because of magic.
And Regina breaks the news to David that their land is still around and that she had lied to him earlier.
What?
The Enchanted Forest, our land. Does it still exist?
Yes. But I have no idea how to get back there.
By the end of the episode, she struggles to burn her mother's book of spells, instead choosing the book and her magic over Henry. Her willingness to change, however, is a big step for Regina going forward. She expects to be happy, but still relies on what her mother indirectly taught her. Growing out of her old ways is not going to be easy, but letting Henry go with David is a solid turn in the right direction. She cannot fully become the mother she wants to be and the person she wants to be until she sheds her former self completely. This is a mirror of David's story this season, as he struggles with this as well. They all must come to terms with having two conflicting lives in their heads and push forward. I'd say that this is the main theme of season 2A. After episode 9, however, the story takes a bit of a break from the organized chaos and the messages become a bit lost until season 3. Continuing on to episode 3, the flashback takes place after Snow White wakes up from the sleeping curse, but before her wedding from the pilot. Snow and David are on the run from King George. Back in the season 1 finale, they had promised to take the kingdoms back from George and Regina. This episode takes place right around the time that they attempt to do so. One of King George's knights kidnaps Snow and brings her to him. This knight is revealed to be Sir Lancelot, who at this point is not a part of the Round Table. King George taunts Snow and tricks her into drinking a potion that makes it so that she can no longer bear children.
We're in love.
Yes, but then she became cursed. She drank a vile potion that made it impossible for us to conceive a child. Family is everything, my dear. Charming could have been that hope for me, but instead he made my suffering worse. For that death is too good for him. First he must know pain, my pain.
No.
You poisoned her. I cursed her. She will never bear a child.
Meanwhile, David arrives at his mom's cottage and informs her that Snow is on her way there as well, and randomly a group of George's men arrive and tries to kill them. David fights them off, but he realizes that his mom was shot by an arrow. Snow arrives with Lancelot, who tells them all about a magical lake that has restorative properties, the same one that David visited with Abigail back in season 1 episode 13, What Happened to Frederick. The lake's water will supposedly heal Ruth's injuries. When they arrive to the lake, however, it's all dried up. They do find a shell that contains the final few drops. However, Ruth only pretends to drink it and instead has Lancelot save it for Snow. Ruth tells them that she doesn't think that the water's working, basically says that her dying wish is to see her son and his new bride get married. And seeing as Lancelot was a knight of the Round Table, he has the ability to marry them during this private ceremony. Both of them drink water from this cute little chalice. The water inside of it contains the lake water, and suddenly Snow's womb is restored. Ruth, however, dies moments after the couple kiss. The reason Ruth decided to give Snow the water was because she and Snow tried using an old wives' tale in order to determine the gender of her baby.
North to south, it's a boy. East to west, it's a girl. Just between us. Oh, I don't think that's a good idea. Indulge an old woman. Just silly superstition. He cursed me. So that I can never have children.
Later on in the episode, David and Snow try out this wives' tale out themselves, which ends up working.
It's just a superstition.
There's something I need to tell you. We're going to have a child.
It's going to be a boy, right? I can never remember which direction means what.
It's a surprise.
and Snow, who's still keeping this a secret from David, learns that the lake water was in the chalice. In the present day of this episode, we finally catch back up with Emma and Snow White. They are dragged to a safe haven where Mulan's people live. This patch of land was for some reason completely left untouched by the curse, minus the time freeze effect. For whatever reason, people on this patch of land were left there and unable to age. Emma and Snow only realize this because after getting locked up, Snow White encounters Cora, Regina's mother.
As bad as you think Regina is, this woman is worse. I just want to help you. Let's hear her out. Emma, right now we are at the bottom of a hole with no other options. And Henry is back in Stryper with Regina. Who's Henry? My son. I kind of share him with Regina. It's complicated. Don't talk to her.
And she doesn't look like she's aged. One of the guards then brings Emma and Snow to the leader of the compound, and it turns out that the leader is none other than Lancelot from the flashback. Lancelot decides to let Emma and Snow leave the safe haven so that they can go and try and find a portal to their land, because obviously they don't want to stay here in the Enchanted Forest. Their plan is to travel to Snow White's old castle to see if they can find the wardrobe that Emma was originally sent through. Aurora decides to hold a knife to Snow's neck due to her not trusting them. While the two tussle, Emma makes the colossal mistake of shooting her gun, which alerts the ogres nearby.
Drop the weapon.
Any idea what you've just done?
I gotta say, the CGI, even for 2012, is pretty bad here. We get this really cool moment where Snow defends Emma, whose gun has been smashed by an ogre.
Back away from my daughter!
It's the first moment where Emma truly sees where she comes from. She sees that her mother wasn't some damsel in distress. She was a bandit for years and knows how to throw down. Then they arrive to Snow White's old castle and find the wardrobe. Lancelot appears from behind them and apparently was following them this whole time. Snow realizes that he isn't the real Lancelot when he mentions Henry's name, which they never told him. They only said that name around one person since being here.
Are you so interested in the wardrobe?
I just want you to get home to your husband and son, Henry.
There is only one person you told Henry's name. Cora.
Clever girl. And that would be Cora. Cora lifts her cloaking spell and attacks the girls. Emma sets fire to the wardrobe, making it unusable. Cora leaves empty-handed, and the girls return to the haven. Later on in the episode, Cora grabs the ashes of the tree and restores their magic. We also get a side plot this episode where Henry reunites Jefferson with his daughter, and I think this might be like the last episode we see him in. Oh no, we do see him in episode 5, but Sebastian Stan, he was booked and busy in 2012. Episode 4 focuses on Rumpelstiltskin and tells the story of how he lost his ex-wife Mila. Before Rumpel became the Dark One, and before he lost his son, he was married to a woman named Mila. One night, Rumpelstiltskin comes to find out that she has been flirting with a pirate at a local tavern. Mila criticizes Rumpel about his cowardice, and she says that he's not a real man.
You have responsibilities.
You mean like being a man and fighting in the ogre wars? Other wives became honored widows while I became lashed to the village coward. Go on home, Rumpel. It's what you're good at.
The next day, Rumpel returns and finds out that she was kidnapped by one of these pirates. He arrives at the ship, and the captain of the crew, Killian Jones, offers a chance for them to duel it out. Rumpel instead proves that he is too much of a coward and decides to run away from the duel.
Please, son. What am I going to tell my boy?
Try the truth. His father's a coward.
Many, many years later, after Rumpelstiltskin loses his son Balefire in episode 19 of season 1 titled The Return, he makes a deal with the black market trader for a magic bean.
Remember, you failed to deliver. I spin the clock forward and turn you into dust.
While in the tavern and after doing business with the black market trader, Rumpelstiltskin sees the captain that took his wife away from him many years ago. Later that night, he decides to confront the captain and issues the same proposition of the duel that the two would have had 10 years prior. During the sword fight, Rumpelstiltskin nearly rips Killian's heart out before Mila jumps out of nowhere and proclaims her love for the captain. Rumpel is just now learning that his ex-wife Mila is in fact alive and was not kidnapped by this captain. She in fact decided to leave him willingly. The pirate couple try to prevent Rumpel from taking the bean from them. However, Rumpelstiltskin kills Mila and chops Killian's hand off, which is in possession of the bean.
I never loved you.
I'll have what I came for now.
You have to kill me first.
I'm afraid that's not in the cards for you, sonny boy. Killing me is gonna take a lot more than that, dearie.
I will find a way.
Well, good luck living long enough.
He leaves the captain alive to suffer, knowing that his true love was taken from him, much like she was from Rumpel. Rumpel leaves and Killian reveals to his crew that he switched which hand held the bean, so now the bean is in their possession. He raises his severed wrist
What's the name of the place we're headed, Cap?
and replaces his hand with a hook. That's cinematic history right there. Using the bean, he tells his crew that they're leaving for another realm called Neverland so that he may never age in order to plot his revenge on the Dark One. If that's not a character reveal, I don't know what is.
So we have a few updates here on the family tree board. As of episode 4, we learned that Rumpelstiltskin's ex-wife Mila left him for a pirate named Killian Jones. You may also know him as Captain Hook from Peter Pan. After Rumpel kills Mila, Hook leaves for Neverland, and that is when his epic adventures happen over there. He does promise himself to eventually return to the Enchanted Forest to deal with his pesky little crocodile right here.
In the present day, after an argument with Mr. Gold, Belle storms out and later is kidnapped by Mr. Smee. Yes, Mr. Smee from the Jolly Roger, who had been hired by Mo to take Belle to the mines and have her memory erased in order to make her forget about Mr. Gold. Gold teams with David and Ruby to find Belle and Mr. Smee.
But seriously, wow.
Belle then refuses to forgive her father for doing this to her and Rumpelstiltskin for their argument that they had earlier.
Thank you for what you just did. But that doesn't change that you're too cowardly, to be honest with you.
Well, I tried to tell him that, Bill. Come with me, darling.
After what you just tried to do to me, you don't get to decide what I do or how I feel. I do.
Later on, Belle is given the keys to the abandoned Storybrooke library that lies below the clock tower. When she arrives, she meets Gold there, which reveals to us that Mr. Gold was the one that gave her the keys. He explains to her the reason why he created the curse.
Balefire is his name. After he left, I went down many paths until I found a curse that could take me to the land where he'd escaped.
Here.
And I found myself in this little town.
But instead of looking for him, you brought magic.
Because I'm still a coward. Magic has become a crutch. I now know I can never leave this place.
Anyone who leaves forgets the people they love.
And finally, in the last scene, we get the reveal that Cora, in the Enchanted Forest, has been working with Killian this entire time. They discuss their plots to leave for Storybrooke, where Cora can be reunited with her daughter, and Killian can be reunited with the man that took his true love from him. In episode 2 titled We Are Both, Regina in the past is completely heartbroken from the loss of Daniel. Feeling lost and genuinely wanting to know how her mother came to be so evil, she contacts the man who gave Cora her book of spells. This man is none other than everyone's favorite imp, Rumpelstiltskin.
Rumpelstiltskin, I summon thee.
That's not how you say it, dearie.
What are you?
What, my, what a rude question. I am not a what.
When Regina asks him how to deal with Cora, Rumpelstiltskin gives
How you say it, dearie.
What are you?
Not a what? I'm not a fucking what?
What, my, what a rude question. I am not a what.
When Regina asks him how to deal with Cora, Rumpelstiltskin gives her a gift.
Ben, can you help me?
Possibly, yes. You seek power.
I don't want to hurt anyone.
Hard to believe you're from the same family. So powerful. You could do so much if you just let yourself.
Let me show you the way.
Magic. It can set you free.
I don't want to end up like her.
No, of course not. This is a portal to a specific, annoying little world. Useless to me, but for your purposes, a perfect. You're unlikely ever to see her again.
All she needs is a little push.
The question is, can you do it?
A looking glass which doubles as a portal. On Regina's wedding day, she confronts her mother and attempts to banish Cora.
Well, the thing is, I don't want to be you.
While she's unsuccessful at first, Rumpelstiltskin appears in the mirror and tells her to push Cora using magic. Regina lets out a guttural scream and unlocks a darkness in herself, performing her first act of magic. Cora falls through the portal and is banished from the enchanted forest. At first, Regina denies Rumpelstiltskin's help, but then accepts it when she realizes how much she loved the way that magic made her feel.
It's not what I asked, dearie. How did it feel to use magic?
It doesn't matter. I'll never use it again.
Why not?
Because I loved it.
This episode does such a great job at showcasing the beginning stages of Regina's flirtation with magic and power. She started out wanting nothing to do with it due to her mother being so power obsessed herself, but once she gets a taste of it, she cannot let go of it and follows right in Cora's footsteps, something that she was trying to avoid. This show's use of and commentary on familial trauma is done so well, at least most of the time. It constantly has the characters asking the question of, am I the way I am because of how I was raised, or am I just a horrible person? Episode 5 is yet another Regina-focused episode. Set months after banishing her mother, Regina is struggling with her training. Rumpelstiltskin believes that she is ready for the darkest act she's committed thus far.
Take its heart.
Like what my mother did.
Oh, your true love, indeed. Then you already know how it's done. Gentle.
It's innocent.
Nothing is innocent. Show me you know what to do with that power. Kill it. And I had such high hope.
But Regina refuses, citing her uneasiness surrounding the fact that her mother often collected hearts like trophies. Regina asks if she can use her magic for good, like bringing her fiancé Daniel back to life. Rumpel tells her that it's not that simple. Resurrection is never going to be possible. There's just nobody who can actually do it.
Can you teach me how to use magic to bring back the dead?
That's what this is about. The stable boy.
I want true happiness.
Then find it elsewhere, dearie. Magic can do much, but know that.
And I am lost.
And I've had my time wasted. I'm sorry, but transcending death is beyond even my reach.
Randomly, we get a cameo here from Jefferson, and he shows up claiming to know a doctor who can perform this procedure for Regina. The doctor arrives, and do you want to know who the doctor is? It's Dr. Whale. Dr. Whale from the present day. He attempts to resurrect Daniel, but fails.
I'm sorry. I failed.
This devastates Regina, who returns to being Rumpelstiltskin's pupil and demonstrates her readiness by ripping the heart out of his new protege and crushing it to prove her advancement. Where were we? It's actually revealed here that Rumpelstiltskin is in cahoots with Jefferson and the Doctor. Rumpelstiltskin needed the Doctor to crush Regina's spirit in order to motivate her, and the Doctor needed a heart from Cora's vault in order to use for his own work. The Doctor returns to his realm, which for some reason has no color, which we will explain later. He uses the heart to resurrect his brother, which reveals to the audience that Dr. Whale is none other than Victor Frankenstein. So these two flashbacks secure Regina's spot under Rumpelstiltskin.